This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10 and all human life is here. Mark and Mike to kick things off. Mike writes, the comparisons to Enoch Powell are hyperbolic and demonstrate the left's inability to tackle these issues seriously, leading to the rise of Faragism. If the left and right are calling you names, you're probably doing something right. I think the first place to look for the plan is next week's EU summit. Meanwhile, Mark in Edinburgh writes, if Farage had made this disturbing dog whistle island of strangers speech, we would call it out for what it is. This is Starmer's Enoch Powell moment, shamelessly pandering to the far right in a desperate effort to stop hemorrhaging votes to Reform UK. There are... Oh, and another Mark. Should we try and only take messages from Mikes and Marks today? So it's Mark 2, Mike 1 at the moment. And another Mark, this one says, hi James, it's Mark in Bristol. I'm a Labour voter. I think Keir Starmer has navigated a variety of serious issues very well. However, I don't feel comfortable with this language. I think he is doing this to sweep up some of the centre-right ground, which the Tories are falling out of. Great for votes. I don't know if that's true, then... You know, there's a calculus that justifies it. But if it's not true, then it is a surrender of what many people see as an important principle upon the altar of nothing. Great for votes, suggests / hopes Mark, but he needs to maintain a fundamental principle of fairness to all. It's funny, I don't know why I was drawn a moment ago to the idea that we need to distinguish between the online and the offline world. But I think what I mean by that is the terminally online. The people whose... interactions are almost entirely confined to the internet. The polar opposite of what we do here, actually. I think yesterday was a timely reminder of the full multiplicity of positions that we can explore on this programme. But the problem for some people, of course, is always that we will explore them. It's still not as commonplace as it needs to be before a democracy can start fully functioning again. But you have to get people to interrogate their own positions. They have to explain what they mean by the words that they use and indeed explain the roots of their opinions. Because if the roots turn out to be bogus or non-existent, or if they can't tell you the meaning of the words that they use, then the opinions are... Well, they're useless intellectually. They're still valid electorally. You don't have to provide an essay on how you've arrived at your destination before you stick a cross in a box in a booth. But for our purposes, there's no point being here if we don't actually explore and interrogate positions. Another Mark's been in touch to tell us that all is tickety-boo in the Cotswolds this morning, so thank goodness for that. The Cotswolds are a little like the haberdashery department at Peter Jones department store in Sloane Square, where John Betjeman, the former poet laureate, once said he would make his way in the event of the 4-minute warning being sounded. What would you do if you had 4 minutes before the bomb dropped? And John Betjeman said, I'd go to the haberdashery department in Peter Jones because nothing bad could ever happen there. I think that's a beautiful... There you go. That's English. That's got a touch of the... essentially English to it, and that of course is the problem with people who talk about stuff like that. You can't really cast your vote because of what a dead poet said about the Peter Jones haberdashery department, but it tickles my fancy. It warms my cockles. I mentioned the distinction between online and offline because if you are terminally online, I don't know that anybody can reach you now. We may talk later in the programme. Sadiq Khan will be taking your calls in the second hour. We may talk in the third hour about yet another extraordinary milestone on the slow boiling of an entire population. The way that we are discovering people who no longer look like eccentrics, no longer seem to be wearing tinfoil hats, people who are right in the middle of our world, sitting next to us, perhaps in bed with us, our colleagues, our friends, our fellow jurors on jury service, just believing the most bonkers things. Even the Daily Mail uses the word bonkers in a headline today to describe the latest conspiracy theory that has got halfway around your world, not just the world of David Icke fans, halfway around your world, before the truth, in this case, Emmanuel Macron's truth, had even got its trousers on. So if you're terminally online, then you're in one of two camps on this. You are either persuaded that everybody who doesn't look like you is a wrong-un and a threat and a danger and an invader and a fighting age man and all the rest of it, or you are persuaded that the speech that Keir Starmer gave yesterday merits comparisons with Enoch Powell. I don't think either position is likely to turn out to be true, but my personal sort of proclivities obviously nudge me more towards a state of shock and disappointment at what was said yesterday than towards a place of approval. But we will do what we always do. We will wonder what the plan is. And this is why there are two groups of people that I'm thinking of first. The first group of people are the ones that I have seen online, and these are not what you would describe. Some of them I know offline and some of them I don't, but these are not people you would describe as overly excitable. And they feel very personally hurt, particularly by the line about the island of strangers. I'm not here to defend Keir Starmer today. I'm categorically not. I think it may turn out to be a horrific misstep politically. Morally, it's already pretty close to disgusting. And everyone has a point at which pragmatism ceases to justify absence of principle. But I don't know that the island of strangers line reads quite as some of the coverage would claim. We would all be strangers. Is the point. It's not just that people who were not born here would be strange. If you and I feel no kinship, then we are both strangers. And that is not a particularly targeted line. I wouldn't have let it pass. If I was writing his speech or advising him, I'd have said, you can't say that. It sounds like citizens of nowhere. And whoever came up with the phrase would have defended it by saying, no, because citizens of nowhere drew a distinction between citizens of somewhere and citizens of nowhere. An island of strangers means that everybody is strangers. Everybody is strangers. Do you see what I mean? I don't think that's pedantic semantics. I think that is probably what the intention was, but one thing we can almost all agree on, it failed. It failed. Because that is not how it has been received, and that is not who it has spoken to. So then you've got language tests, you've got crackdowns on visas. Sheila had a great phone-in yesterday about what the reality of that might be, and it may well turn out not to be pretty. He's become the 17th Prime Minister in 10 years to talk about taking back control, but then he used the phrase squalid chapter of rising inward migration. Now, if you look at the numbers since Brexit, and you want to make a case for them being unsustainable or unjustifiable, then your case falls apart when anybody sensible points out that they're not expected to be sustained. There have been very unique circumstances, most obviously Ukraine, Hong Kong, and to a lesser extent Afghanistan. So that idea, and happily now I'm no longer the only person in the media telling you that next week the numbers are going to plummet. They're going to halve. The overall figures are going to absolutely plummet. So why he's had to do this week and upset so many people is a question that only he could answer. Let me put it this way, he said. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they are written down. Often they are not, but either way they give shape to our values, guide us towards our rights, of course, but also our responsibilities, the obligations we owe to each other. In a diverse nation like ours, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. You could position that as a unifying sentiment, but it hasn't landed that way with most people I've encountered so far. Zara Sultana, the independent MP for Coventry South, wrote that Starmer had imitated Enoch Powell's speech, which, whether she realises it or not, is manna from heaven for people who are far right, for people who are racist. Comparing Enoch Powell or comparing Keir Starmer to Enoch Powell is guaranteed to push more measured analysis off the front pages. The Daily Mail will be all over it. The Guardian will have no choice but to include it in its analysis. And the question of whether or not it's fair, whether or not he seemed in any way to be painting targets on the backs of people born elsewhere, seems to me to be ignored by that analysis. But it's still an ugly moment. It's still an ugly moment. And I wonder what you think the plan is. 0345 6060 973. In a diverse nation like ours, and he's not criticising diversity, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. I hope I'm wrong, but I think this will embolden racists. I don't think that Keir Starmer deserves at this point to be put in the same pot as them, but I think it will embolden racists. Now, whether they've priced that in as a consequence of what he's done, I do not know. But it will not be, I don't think, the intention of the speech. If he emboldens, people will now feel more comfortable. I don't know if you were listening to yesterday's show, but 2 or 3 callers who felt a little bit like blasts from the past. One talking about British values or British culture without having even a single syllable to say in explanation of what he actually meant by that. Another talking about how bad behaviour on the roads is evidence of how badly immigration has gone without ever having... it would appear, without it ever having occurred to him, that you can't tell somebody's immigration status when you see them through the windscreen of a car. But, of course, that leads many people to conclude that he meant something else, or he has some other way of identifying these people. And there may have been another one as well. And listen, it may have been a coincidence, and it may have had something to do with my introduction when I talked about an impulse. You see, I do think about the show sometimes afterwards. I talked about an impulse that you feel when someone does you a disservice and you note their origin, or you think you know their origin. So someone pushes in front of you in a queue, and if they don't look like you and they sound like they've come from somewhere else, then there is likely and often an impulse that you don't have when it's someone who does push in front of you in a queue. It's why if you're suffering from sort of road rage or something like that, you might find yourself saying things that you would never say in a million years. You might reference somebody's weight, or you might reference somebody's spectacles. You might reference their lack of hair or their gingerness, or you're just looking for something that is a bit like a schoolyard insult because you're aggrieved and affronted. And I think we do the same, possibly worse sometimes, with immigration, with ethnicity, and it's bigger in a way, that idea I've got more right to be here than you. This is the obvious opposite of my politics, in case anybody needs that pointing out. But it is, I hope, an explanation of other people's position. And when push came to shove, you would be as unlikely to sustain your ethnicity or your origin-based insults as you would be your spectacles or your weight-based insults in a different context with somebody who does look a little bit more like you. Like children, we focus on difference. We focus on difference, and we worry at the difference when we're trying to hurt the person that's different. So what was the plan? Keir Starmer seems to me to be talking to people who think that there are too many people in their world who do not look like them. I don't think this is about behaviour. I could be wrong, but for the massive majority of people who have high concern about immigration, the evidence tells us they don't live in areas where they are likely to regularly encounter people born elsewhere, unless they go to hospital, or they need to put a parent in a care home, or they enjoy eating out, or various other areas where overseas workers are relied on: social care, hospitality, health, universities, construction and engineering, just little things like that make no difference at all to the general well-being of a country. Social care, health, hospitality, universities, construction and engineering. The people who live in areas of very low immigration historically have the highest levels of concern about it. And I think those are the people that he's speaking to. I think the people that Keir Starmer is addressing are the people who have a sense that there are too many people not like them in their country, even as I remind you that the people most likely to hold that position are the people whose own communities do not reflect that conclusion. It's why the rhetoric of no-go areas is so powerful. It's why nobody ever pauses to wonder why in a country that did deliver a form of celebrity to Enoch Powell, people born elsewhere may choose to congregate in certain parts of town. If you put up posters, as the Tories did in Birmingham not that long ago, saying vote Labour if you want an N-word for a neighbour, and if you were black and you had the opportunity to move in next door to somebody who was the same colour as you, perhaps you would take it. Perhaps you'd be more likely to take it in the context of posters and rhetoric like that. And that is where Starmer has put himself. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. I'd like to be wrong about this. And I can make some defences, as I have, about I think the silliness of focusing on the talk of an island of strangers as evidence of Enoch Powell-style calls for the whip hand to be restored to white people. I mean, I think probably that's a comparison that only somebody who's not read the Rivers of Blood speech for a while could reasonably make. But you'll get your headlines, you'll get your media attention and the rest of it. Who was Starmer talking to yesterday? Because the entire project hinges on this idea that the snarling nativism, the notion of human hierarchy, I am better than you because I was born, it hinges on the idea that is a small minority of the people who feel aggrieved, the people who feel threatened. I had a colleague doing Vox Pops this morning, and the ease, the blitheness with which people can move from chatting to a local shopkeeper who is of Asian heritage and then saying into a microphone, there's just too many of them, without quite connecting that when you say them, you mean him. So who is Keir Starmer? Who was he talking to yesterday? And do people like me perhaps need to be a little bit more open to the idea that they're not unable to justify their position, or just nativist snarlers? 0345 6060 973. Who do you think this was aimed at? And maybe it's you. I hope so. I hope you feel able to ring in. Or maybe it's your mum. Where do we draw this line? We've tried this a million times in the past. I'm not sure we've ever succeeded. Between the people who deserve to be described in all of the familiar, not necessarily very helpful ways, but in all of the familiar ways, the people who deserve to be called xenophobic or bigoted or racist even, and the people who have, quotes, legitimate concerns, but don't deserve all of those epithets, all of those descriptions. Who was he talking to? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Crazy bit. I'm sorry, I didn't realise I had so much to say about this, but it's been percolating since we came off yesterday. The crazy bit is the bit that I gave you the heads up on last week. The fact that the ONS numbers are going to go down at a speed and a scale that we've not seen before. Where they end up panning out, I do not know, but the difference between where they are going anyway, in terms of the decline in overall numbers, and the difference that will be made by what was announced yesterday with regards to student visas, social care visas, the skilled visa route and the rest of it is quite small. And it makes it all the odder that he has rolled the dice on something that has led some people to conclude that he's aping the rhetoric of the far right. 23 minutes after 10 is the time. No, there isn't a power cut, Irish Paul. The phone lines are full. Sorry about that. But I'll shut up, take some calls, and hopefully free up some space for you to get through. Let's start with David, who's in Durham. David, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James. Hope you're right this morning.
Very well.
So you asked the question, what do I think the plan is the first thing you said when you came on air.
Yes, it is.
And I think that everything about this government has been about short-term pain for long-term gain. And I think this is all about trying to convince those reform voters, those more Tory voters, to say, in 4 years' time when we have an election, look, we were strong on immigration. We said in our manifesto, this is something we tackle.
And the numbers oddly will support that position, but that doesn't explain the need for yesterday's rhetoric.
No, exactly. It's why I'm concerned. I'm definitely a left-wing voter. My policies are much closer to the Greens or the Lib Dems, but okay. I'm pragmatic in that I've kind of I voted Labour in the last election because I believe that if I was going to have any chance of seeing what I wanted happening, it was through a Labour vote of our voting system. This, however, I think was politically unbelievably stupid.
Do you?
Because even if you can be generous about the comparisons to Enoch Powell, someone in the room must have been aware that was going to be a comparison that was made.
Not necessarily. I mean, sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat this morning. I do what you've just done. I overestimate the calibre of people around prime ministers. I think if we learned anything from Boris Johnson's tenure, it's that the people that they tell us are geniuses are absolute wombats. And it may well be that no one in the room noticed. The same thing happened with Theresa May. In fact, the politician I was thinking most of this morning was Theresa May, not Enoch Powell, with regard to Keir Starmer, the Citizens of Nowhere speech and the extraordinary decision to listen to people like Nick Timothy in the run-up to an election. I think Starmer's more in that zone, perhaps, than anywhere else. And the point I'm making is that he might be surrounded by people who aren't very good at their job.
But that's not very reassuring either. I guess the issue here, more than anything, is politically, I don't think it makes sense anyway, because I don't think you're ever going to convince that lot to vote for him on this. Because whether it's immigrants, whether it's any other minority, they're always going to be angry at something. Yeah. And even if he completely solves it, it's not going to convince them. And on the other side, he's pushed people like me and other voters further away, because it's looking more and more likely that our two-party system is going to get pushed further and further. I'm expecting the next election to have a huge array of parties getting a lot of votes.
It could be, yeah. I mean, it may be. That could be one of the upshots of it. You could see a coalition around the Gaza issue as well, which of course saw Labour lose a number of seats last year. Listen to this from Tony in Bishop Stortford. My mother-in-law voted for Brexit. When she visits the doctors, she always comments on the nationality of the doctor and seemingly can't pronounce any name that's not English. She said yesterday, Starmer is finally talking sense to me. Now, that might be true, but, as you suggest, it won't necessarily translate into votes.
No, and I mean, my mother says similar things, and I'm not expecting her to even cast a vote in the next election, to be completely honest with you.
And should Keir Starmer ignore her existence then, or should he try at least to reach her as he did yesterday?
I think traditionally, in this country anyway, our politics has always been a fight for the centre ground.
Yes.
Whereas I think we're moving more towards your party as a brand, and holding the centre ground and trying to appeal to both sides is making the far left and the far right ignore you. You need to have a strong sense of ideals and a sense of who you are as a party and as a person. And Keir Starmer, throughout his career, has shown that he goes with the wind. He was very supportive of Jeremy Corbyn. He's moved away from a lot of those policies now because he's trying to appeal to a wide range of people. And I think it's just making more people move away from him.
We shall see. I mean, as by your own admission, you you lent your vote to Labour, as it were. You already lean more towards the Greens or the Lib Dems. On the policy platform, he hasn't moved quite as far as some of the coverage allows, certainly on the nationalisation of the railways, on the workers' rights bills, on various other renters' rights, various other areas. I think that he's done a lot of things that people would have expected a Labour leader to do. But, as you say, he may have also pushed people away. Graham's not happy. I'll read this in its entirety, even though Graham's no longer listening. Sorry, James, you're getting switched off again for an hour for yet again misrepresenting Labour policy, and this one's the worst. You say perhaps Starmer didn't mean it the way it's been received, but then go on to emphasise the right-wing misinterpretation of it by people who haven't even read it. Well, to be fair, mate, I don't think anyone's going to describe Zara Sultana or Nadia Whittome as right-wing. They're independent MPs, certainly in Zara Sultana's case. Nadia Whittome still in Labour, but who very much are to the left of their own movement. So that bit's not fair, but I'll read the rest. This really is dog whistle call-in show territory. You normally take an unexpected view on a topic in the news and prompt people to think again, which is what makes your show interesting. But here you are again, promoting the far-right misinterpretation. I don't know how you can say that. Hey, shame on you is fine. I mean, that's freedom of speech. But I don't know how you can say that when the only people I've quoted from the political spectrum are an independent ex-Labour MP and a Labour MP, Nadia Whittome, who said the government's rhetoric on migrants was shameful and dangerous. So shame on you, Graham. Honestly, no wonder we should have stuck to Mikes and Marks on this morning's show. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the conversation or the question is pretty clear, clearer than usual. Well, it moved, didn't it? It evolved slightly from what's the plan to who is he talking to? And quite a lot of you are telling me that he's talking to your mum. He's talking to your parents, which rather begs the question, not so much are they listening, but will it change anything? Here's Dominic Ellis with your headline.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:32 is the time. I like this from Laura in Renfrew. So the answer to the question today is your mum. I feel like I'm back in high school in the early 1990s, whereas James points out that if Starmer is talking to my mum, he's wasting his time. She never listens. One thing I will say that might make you laugh, I don't actually think that what happened yesterday had much to do with the local election results of the previous week. If you look at some of the manifesto pledges, not the Keir Starmer of 2020, but the Keir Starmer of 2024, some of the conversations they've had in this area, as one texter has reminded me, some of the stuff that Wes Streeting has said about his dad, not your mum, your dad. Wes Streeting's dad, Leo reminds us. Streeting told another interviewer that he was fixated on what Wes Streeting's dad would think of a policy or an idea. Wes Streeting's Tory dad. Sounds like a band that might be on one of the smaller stages at Glastonbury, doesn't it? Wes Streeting's Tory dad. But there we are. Who was Keir Starmer talking to? And crucially, will it work? And also, do these people deserve to be denigrated in the way that a lot of the analysis today denigrates them? You know, you're effectively saying, by calling Keir Starmer Enoch Powell Mark II, you're effectively saying that the people he's trying to reach are Enoch Powell fans. And that's why I'm very uncomfortable with that overreach. But we'll see. Kevin is in Sunderland. I've got some free phone lines now, by the way. 0345 6060 973. Only two, so be quick. Kevin's in Sunderland, which is a politically pertinent position. Kevin, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So I can't help but think the timing of this it has to be related to the votes last week. Specifically in our area, the Labour's had it so easy for so long in the former pit villages up here. Yes. A total anti-Tory sentiment that was never shook until Boris Johnson came in. And I've seen it in the rhetoric around the area, within my circles, family, friends, etc. For the first time, people willing to vote Tory.
Because of Brexit, because they felt that and that's why I mentioned Sunderland being pertinent, because they felt that their Brexit vote had not been properly realised or not delivered. And never mind the facts, that was the feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so sure. I think even the lead up to the Brexit, a lot of them wanted to vote. You could see there was some pushing towards the likes of Farage's party. But I think as soon as Boris Johnson started making comments about letterboxes and the smiles, etc., that swayed a lot of the public opinion, I think, and certainly in the area. Okay. Because they were just speaking and making comments that people who don't normally, as you said earlier in your analysis, come across much immigration until they go to hospital, go to big city centres, go to universities. Yeah. We're hearing that and saying, yeah, that's right, or having a little chuckle and say, that's how I talk. And
people don't feel guilty or embarrassed by that sense of alienation. They don't. I mean, you know, for everyone, I think it's Stuart Lee in his line, you can't say anything in this country anymore without getting thrown in jail or whatever the exact line may be. Because people are living almost all of their lives in certain bubbles or environments, when they step out of it and feel discomforted by what they encounter, they don't feel guilty about it. Or they don't feel they should. They don't feel they should feel guilty about it.
I think when they step out of it and they say, well, I think something else that you say is this is not my country. This is not. Yeah. This outside of my bubble isn't us. Isn't what we're supposed to be, which is, I suppose, is where the relation to the Enoch Powell speech comes in. So yes, this is for the first time ever we're seeing people now voting for politicians where integrity doesn't become come into it. Honesty doesn't come into it. Any sort of capability in administrative duties, etc., is irrelevant. I think people are voting without their heads at the moment.
Yeah. Do you know people like this? People in this category?
Absolutely. I mean, my family. I come from a family of people who worked on the mines, pitmen and we came through the miners' strike with very little to eat, and for the first time we said people who said they would vote Tory, and then now they've switched away from Labour. They're quite easily willing to lend the vote somewhere else, and I think that scared Keir Starmer. Certainly our local politicians like the Bridget Phillips, etc., they've had it easy for so long, and I think they feel very threatened. And
how do you reach them politically? Because Labour have decided, and in many ways they decided this 15 years ago, not to take the case to the people, not to explain why we need immigration, why immigration is a net positive, why you shouldn't feel the way that you feel. Starmer is doing what Starmer actually always does. It's what he's done with Brexit as well. He is, leaving ideology at the door and legislating for the world that he inhabits. And in that world, people like your family members feel the way that they feel. And he's not going to try to change the way that they feel. He's going to try and make them feel better about how they feel, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with a left wing approach, this isn't going to work because these aren't left wing people.
No. Even though they've always voted Labour. I mean, this is what the blue Labour line is. It means economically left but socially right. Is yesterday's acknowledgement not only of their existence but also of their legitimacy? Is it going to change anything vote wise?
I don't think so, because the argument of left has gone from the workers' rights of the people down in mines, etc., what they were arguing for in the 70s and 80s, to a completely different thing, because the workers' rights job's done. They were left-wing because they wanted workers' rights. They weren't left-wing because they wanted people to put colour skin in the country.
No, and yet the workforce is probably more exploited now than it has been at any point in our lifetime. And that is an area of legislation where they have moved quite far and quite fast, particularly on minimum wage stuff and employment law. But again, I don't know how much of it doesn't touch the sides because of the nature of our oligarch-owned media, or because, people prefer the queue for the ghost train to the queue for the speed your weight machine. Kevin, thank you. Who is he talking to, and will it work? Alec is in Manchester. Alec, what would you like to say?
So I'll start off the conversation with, please help me out, and also I'm not coming from a place of hate, so...
Of course.
The last time we spoke, it was on a similar topic, and there was a lot of callers then saying about how there's lots of lazy English people and whatnot, and there are. I can't dispute it, but I don't think there's a lot of people, especially that are listening, I think, that are quite left-wing and have very good intentions, but this sort of appeals to people like me, myself, because I think 1 million people nearly a year is too many people. It's just physically too many people to build as fast as we need to, services, housing, and that's not the fault of the people coming in. And I wouldn't say no to a single person that did come in, because, well, maybe not zero, but if someone was a horrible person, I wouldn't want them here. But
no, of course.
But the Ukrainians, the Hong Kongers, absolutely we had to take them. Absolutely, that was our duty as people.
But that is the main reason why the numbers got so high. But that's maths. You're talking about a sense. It has to be temporary. Yes, and it is. I mean, the ONS will announce next week that the numbers are a fraction of what they were at the peak. I genuinely think it's certainly going to be less than half of the peak. I think it might even be less than half of last year. But you want that to be recognised. You want that feeling. How does it translate into your voting patterns?
So, if I were to vote and I didn't feel Labour were getting on top of the issues facing the country, I'd be voting with them. I just wouldn't vote for Labour, because I'd feel like the uni party that gets nothing done, that rubbish rhetoric. Yeah. But there's truth to it. If they don't solve the problems, why have them? And then the fear with that is we'll get Nigel Farage. Look at the local elections. So I'm not concerned about the rhetoric. We've got Zara Sultana saying This is Enoch
Mark
Palsoff.
II,
Yeah, I don't believe it for a second.
Sure.
I think Keir Starmer's a good man. But, yeah, I think it's necessary. Look at the biggest voting bloc. It's the Red Wall. You've got to win it. And if you don't try and win it, you get Farage.
You feel, not you, this is Keir Starmer, well, possibly talking to you, but more talking to the Red Wall. You feel overwhelmed.
I don't personally feel
No, I said not you.
like
I'm talking about the Red Wall. And you know, the notion of the numbers being unsustainable. Keir Starmer is speaking to those people and saying, we will do something about it. And that's full stop territory, because the next question is, what if it means economic harm? What if it actually means that your mum can't get a place in a care home? What if it means if your local pub shuts or your university goes bankrupt?
Take it next.
Yeah.
This is where I struggle with. So you say often you can hold two contradictory thoughts in your head.
Yeah.
I have three contradictory thoughts.
We should have a little bell to ring.
I know. Pensioners, they're getting more and more pensioners every year.
Yeah.
Personally, I would scrap the state pension for anyone who has more than £3 million in combined assets. Why are we giving the state pension to billionaires? It's mad. And but this doesn't appeal to Red Wall. This is me personally.
No, I get it. So, I mean, you're politically interesting. No wonder you've got contradictory thoughts in your head. And you feel, I don't know whether or not you feel uncomfortable at saying some of the things that you've said, but I don't think that you should.
I do.
I thought you did.
To be honest,
yeah.
I feel uncomfortable. So this is maybe a slightly racist, but not like intentionally. You know that part of your subconscious racism or something? I don't know how you'd phrase it. Yeah. The idea that the country in 100 years is not going to be made up of people that look like me. But I wouldn't look at a black man or an Asian man and think anything different. I think that's a horrible thought. Yeah. But subconsciously, there is an uncomfortable part of me that I don't know. I really don't like it, but
I think
it's
that's
not
incredibly honest of you. I really do, and I think you're right when you suggest that is. I mean, I don't know that you're the person Keir Starmer is trying to reach, because you were never going to give your vote to the Tories or the even further right lot anyway. But maybe that is the point that everybody else has missed. Maybe it is not going to be an attempt to woo back the headbangers who still think Brexit was a good idea, or the people who do outwardly hate the notion of other people not looking like them. You've got a weird and not entirely coherent sense of unhappiness about the possible future, and that is fed by an apparent failure just to keep a lid on things, or to keep a sense of control on the areas. Yeah. I
can't say that looking at these right-wing articles, there's not a part of me that thinks, oh, have they got a point? And then you look into it and you just think, what a load of nonsense.
Yeah.
But that's the problem. It's not everyone does that, and it feeds on people's base instincts.
It's an unconscious bias, is what you're describing, and we've all got those. We've all got those, and the problem is, I don't know how many people are as thoughtful as you, Alec.
Well, I hope I'm thoughtful.
Well, you're definitely thoughtful.
I do mean well. I don't.
No, you don't have anything to justify or apologise for. You are thoughtful, and you're incredibly honest. And if there are 5 million people like you out there, then Keir Starmer's played a blinder. But I don't know. And that, in fact, I obviously didn't explain it very well, is why at the very beginning of the programme I was talking about making that distinction between what I suppose you could describe as red meat and red wall, between the lazy nativist snarl, you're not like me, therefore you're wrong, you're inferior, I don't want you, and people like you who have feelings that are not always coherent, and sometimes they're contradicting other feelings that you have. But Keir Starmer, I think, is trying to talk to you. Did it work? Did he reassure you?
Yeah, can I make one other minor point?
Yeah,
and I suppose this is going to go against a lot of the Red Wallers. My special Prime Minister's thrown at me, Tony Blair. I was malnutritioned coming up. I literally, one of the best things that happened to me was getting those swimming tickets from the council, and not even learning to swim, just actually going into a swimming pool. Yeah. I hope that for the next child in the council estate that I grew up in, because it changed my life, and we need to be able to afford that. Yeah. The country's not in a good state, and that's what terrifies me, that someone like Farage can play on that and get in. Really does terrify me.
Thank you, mate. That's a call. No, that's a call for the ages. Actually, that is. I mean, that's worth 10 of my bloody introductions. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me.
And we'll talk again.
Have a good day.
We'll talk again. Yeah? All right. Stay safe. Cheers, Alec. It's 10:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
50 is the time. Blimey. I had to do a quick refresher course there. A couple of you suggesting that some of Alec's points reflect Antonio Gramsci's sedimentation theory, which I don't know that it does, but I think if I remember my degree course properly, that's the way in which the ruling class stay in power by actually creating the consensus on common sense. So you kind of let me get this absolutely right. You shape popular consciousness. So that's why I guess I'm obsessed with what right-wing media does to a population. In fact, my last book was all about the creation of an ecosystem in which the crazy stuff could happen. And in a way, and I hadn't thought of this until Alec's call, in a way, Starmer is recognising the ecosystem in which he governs. And it is an ecosystem that has been framed by, if you want to get really pretentious about it, Gramsci's sedimentation theory, or the successful dominance of 40 or 50 years of oligarch-owned media, and largely, of course, right-wing government, which... God, it's both depressing and illuminating at the same time. A lot of love coming in for Alec. Bob puts it best, perhaps, from Glasgow. Great honest call there. He's nailed how I feel, but also the importance of questioning things and finding out the right evidence too. Unfortunately, not everyone does this. Well, that's the big gamble, isn't it? And listen, I recognise the upset of an awful lot of people, and I share it, actually. I'm not going to lie to you. I wish that this speech... Well, there's two ways, isn't there, of breaking it down. I wish that this speech had never been made, or I wish that this speech had never needed to be made. And I'm caught between two stools at the moment, although I'm a heck of a lot closer to wishing that it hadn't been made. Alec has nudged my position a bit. That's why I love my job. It's made me think about things slightly differently. The notion of some cognitive dissonance there, a feeling that this is just not right, but it doesn't mean I look at somebody who doesn't look like me, or someone who cuts me up in traffic, and feel that it's an evidence of immigration being out of control or immigration being wrong. But how do you make the distinctions? I don't know. Alec just managed to. I haven't yet. And Lauren picks up the point. There's another category of people. How do you respond to someone who says, I'm not racist, I'm just concerned about X, Y, or Z, as a cynical ploy to weaponize your civility, your liberal civility and good faith, so they can continue spreading their ideology? They exist in great numbers. How do we handle those people? Well, I hope I show you every day how we handle those people, or at least on the days when they ring in. You know, when Farage complains about people talking foreign on trains, ask him how he knows it's a problem, how he knows it's not just their second language, their English isn't their second language. Well, ask him whether his own children speak foreign at home. When he complains about Romanians living next door, ask him what the difference is between Romanians living next door and Germans living next door, like his own family, or French people living next door, like his own girlfriend. And people talk about values and culture and say, I don't really have a problem. I'm not racist. I'm just concerned about this, that, or the other. Like the other caller yesterday, talking about the NHS being under threat and by immigrants, and then towards the end of the call acknowledging A, that he's an immigrant, and B, that when his wife needed hospital treatment recently, 50% of the staff that they encountered were immigrants. I mean, that's how you do it. You just keep asking the questions. No, listen, it gets you into a lot of trouble. It makes you public enemy number, 3 among certain right-wing blowhards, but that's the point, isn't it? If they can't answer the questions, they're going to get cross with the person asking the questions, not with themselves for believing something that's bogus. So just keep proving that they are, what's the word I'm looking for? Being cynical and weaponizing liberal civility to continue spreading their ideology. Why do you care more about a crime when it's committed by somebody from one background than you do when it's committed by somebody from another background? That's a dog whistle, whether you like it or not. And speaking of dog whistles, of course, if you thought things were bad for Keir Starmer at 10 o'clock this morning, you heard on the 10 o'clock news bulletin that honest Bob Jenrick has offered up some warm words about his speech, which, before Alec's call, you would think, inevitably, that was disastrous for him. But I don't know. They think that there is a constituency of voters out there who are feeling abandoned or are feeling neglected and ignored. And Starmer's trying to reach them. Will it work? Phil's in Liverpool. Phil, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. How you doing?
I'm good.
I thought Alec was an excellent call. And he is, I believe, the person that Keir Starmer's aiming for. For me, when I listened to the speech yesterday, instinctively, I was offended by it, and I thought he'd made a mistake, and all of the things you've discussed.
Yeah.
But I've slept on it, and I do think he's aiming for people like Alec and others who do have some concerns with levels of immigration, with the way immigration is managed, all of the things around it, with jobs, housing, everything else. And those concerns need to be answered. And the only person in that space who's been speaking apparently for them is Farage. And what Keir Starmer's done is he's now entered the space as a reasonable, civilised, right-thinking, fair-minded politician who's prepared to address the issue and all of the other things around it.
And is he going to hemorrhage support from people who were where you were yesterday?
I don't think he will. I think he will gain support from people who were sort of having no choice but to go to Farage if they wanted to address it at all.
Wow.
And I also think he takes away a lot of the weaponry that Farage has, because Farage, unchallenged, can talk any kind of nonsense he likes about immigration. When Keir Starmer talks about immigration, or the Labour Party going forward, it'll all be fact-based and truth-based.
And the numbers are going to support. I'm just looking at the front page of the Daily Mail, which is, I suppose, the closest thing that Faragists have got to a Bible or a House Journal.
Yeah.
Previously, it was to Boris Johnson as the Beano was to Dennis the Menace, but they're in the process of throwing their full weight behind Farage, I think. Starmer ridiculed over plan with no cap on numbers, recycled policies, and which goes against everything he's ever believed in. I mean, it's another point to take us back to Alec. It depends on how much people think about things, because if he's recycling policies that the Daily Mail was all over when the Tories introduced them, but now apparently they don't like them. And the big headline is Labour's taking us all for fools. Is that going to land?
Well, it will with Mail readers, but I mean, if he gave everybody a free bag of chips, the Mail would be complaining there wasn't enough salt. It's just...
that's not one of your own, is it? I've not heard that one before.
It is, yeah.
That's brilliant. I'm nicking that.
I just thought, but that's the Mail, isn't it?
Yes.
So personally, they're not sort of yardstick for me in terms of whether or not the Labour policy will land. In my gut, I just think, I think he's hit on something there, and it will land. And apart from the raw politics of it, it's right. These things do need to be talked about in a civilised, fair-minded way.
It's not. This is an odd parallel to draw, but the question that nobody can ever answer, myself included, when you mount attacks as we often do on people who are using immigration to turn Brit against Brit and to turn community against community and to make life much harder for the othered, when they demand a number and they say, okay, so what is an acceptable level, or how much is right, and everyone can tell you how much is too much, but no one can tell you what the right figure is. And it's why it's really cynical. And no one is going to simply say, well, every single person who wants to come here should be able to come here. I don't think anybody holds that view. But that's why the Tories perhaps looking a little bit, or the Daily Mail at least, looking a little bit desperate when all it's got to complain about is the absence of a cap at the moment. And we've seen what happens in the past. So the one policy he hasn't recycled is a promise to bring in a cap because it's disastrous, but they're still attacking him for recycling. Phil, I thank you, mate. Sadiq Khan will be on air shortly, so I'll take calls for a little bit longer. It means the 11 o'clock news may be slightly delayed. But I like this conversation, and it's one that we'll ask him to contribute to as well, I think. Sam is in Grove Park. Sam, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course.
I'm incredibly nervous about this because I'm essentially calling as a contradictory person, right? I've got really close friends who are very right-wing,
yes,
and I'm not. However, I can't help but empathize with them to try and understand their anger. People are angry, and you've got incredible callers who kind of voiced the concern about people's lifestyles have gone worse compared to the parent compared to when they were a lot younger. You had Aisha, I think yesterday, who voiced that, and Alex today was incredibly powerful. So they realize, there's a break of the social contract, like you always say, where I've done everything I can do.
You're making me sound boring. You're making me sound boring.
Sorry, I apologize.
Okay, no, you're not. Go on. Well, you might.
But it's like they can't afford homes anymore. I mean, the underlying problem is essentially capitalism. Thatcher sold off all the homes without replacing them, and we kept on increasing the house prices because of the lack of supply, because we didn't build any, and we ended up basically. Okay, let me try.
No, you're doing brilliantly, because I think where you're taking us is to the place where it is easy for bad people or bad actors to persuade your angry friends that the reason why they're not getting their share is because of immigration. And specifically, it gets really ugly when it's immigrants. It's the people, not just the process.
Yeah, it's the easiest explanation. You can't go and give a complex explanation because, at the end of World War II, we were the one of the most powerful winners. So life was much easier then. The house prices were 3x your income.
I mean, let's not get carried away. There was a lot of malnutrition and incredible levels of child poverty. I think it's more
perfect back then.
Well, no, I wouldn't go back to the 1940s or certainly the sort of pre-Attlee years. I just go to the 70s and the 80s or the 60s. Exactly. The boomers,
they
had
the best lifestyle.
Yes,
university was free, healthcare was amazing. They could afford homes because the homes were in relation to their income, like not that as much.
But
this
is it, isn't it, Sam? I mean, this is it. Yeah. This is everything, because the people who are blaming immigration for their problems are blaming the wrong target. That brings us back to Gramsci. And yet, somehow, the speech has attempted to make them feel seen.
Yeah,
Did it work? Has it worked among your friends?
Not particularly, because I don't think Labour can say anything for them to sort of say, look, they're being hard on immigration. They're targeting the people who seem to be making our life harder. Ironically, we have a really interesting conversation where I tell them I'm left-leaning, but I'm like, Farage is not telling you the truth. Yeah. But you know what? I hope he becomes prime minister, because within 5 years, you'll know that all these lies will be caught out.
5 years, mate. He'll make Liz Truss look like Winston Churchill. It'll be 5 minutes. In fact, the first analysis they've done has suggested that the economic impact of a Farage in Downing Street would make Liz Truss look like an economic genius. Sam, thank you. There's nothing to be nervous about, but I have kept you on the line for a little longer than Keith would like. It is 3 minutes after 11. Your chance to speak to the Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
7 minutes after 11 is the time. The Mayor of London, Sir Sadiq Khan, is here. If you want to put a question to him, the number you need is, as always, 0345 6060 973. And sliding the Mayor into the middle of the show actually increases your opportunity of getting on air, because we're quite creatures of habit, us radio people. You can watch it live on the brand new LBC app, and if you want to put a question to the Mayor, you can call us now on 0345 6060 973. Hit the numbers now. You will get through. And speaking of the brand new LBC app, I was reading a rather splendid article on there not long ago, in which Sadiq Khan, somebody wrote, increasingly we came to appreciate that our people could have multiple identities. For example, I'm proud to be a Londoner and to be English, just as I'm proud to be of Pakistani and Asian heritage, and proud to be European and someone of Islamic faith. In my eyes, these identities don't contradict one another. They make us who we are. There's no tension between patriotism and pluralism. Apparently, they make us an island of strangers.
Well, let me be quite clear. Good morning, James, to you and your listeners. I speak both as the Mayor of London and as a citizen of this great city my entire life, and saying I recognise every day the massive contribution a successive wave of migrants has made to our city economically, socially and culturally. And I want to thank those who are migrants for what they do for our great city. I'm the son of immigrants, as you alluded to, and I can say from my own personal experience that I practice my faith. I'm very proud of my heritage, which is Pakistani and Indian, but also of being a Londoner and a Brit.
A squalid chapter of rising inward migration, your leader? Because you mentioned you're Mayor of London, you mentioned your nationality, you mentioned your religion, your background, your family. You didn't mention your membership of the Labour Party.
Well, look, the sort of language that I use is different to the sort of language used by others. That's not the sort of words that I would use. And I just say this to your listeners. I think it's possible to recognise the massive contribution made by lawful migration, but also to recognise that many of the promises made by the Brexiteers were false. We've gone from a situation where lawful migration was 100,000, 200,000, to where it's 900,000, 700,000, more than 600,000. And I think we should have control over our borders. But I think you can be consistent in saying that and also recognising the massive contribution made by successive generations of migrants.
What emotions do you feel when you see those words, like squalid chapter and island of strangers, from a Labour Prime Minister?
Well, my job is to reassure those of you listeners who may be nervous and titchy. Well, when you read the entire white paper, the white paper actually is about solutions to some of the challenges faced.
It's not just about the message, is it? It's about the messenger, and the messenger chose to use those phrases, and he's your mate, Keir Starmer.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you listen to the Prime Minister's speech, he also talked about diversity being a strength.
But I'm not asking you, respectfully, I'm not asking you about those bits. I'm asking you how you feel about these bits, specifically. Squalid chapter. He's talking about your parents. And an island of strangers. He's talking about you.
I think, to be fair to the Prime Minister, it's important that we are. He was referring to recent years in terms of the promises.
Someone else's parent.
Well, no, the point he was making, I think, from the passage in the speech you're referring to, is the promises made by Brexiteers to, inverted commas, take back control. The highest numbers of net migration have been in the most recent years. 900,000, 700,000, 600,000. I think, and you'll correct me, that's what he's referring to. What he was not referring to, because I know how rich his constituency is in relation to the contribution made by migrants, is the contribution we make to this multicultural capital city and country.
And yet you know that the numbers announced next week are going to be half of the figures, that even the lowest figure that you've just cited. I'll ask you one more time how you felt personally, and you've been very honest with me in this studio over the years, including on questions like this when the words perhaps had come from other lips. How do you feel to hear a Labour Prime Minister talking about a squalid, that word squalid chapter, not an unacceptable chapter or an unreasonable or an unsustainable chapter, a squalid chapter and an island of strangers?
Well, those aren't words that I'd use.
But how did you feel?
Well, look, I read the white paper,
okay,
and I understand the context of the white paper, and those aren't words that I'd use.
Before we head to the phones, what on earth happened on the London Underground yesterday?
So if I could explain,
there's a gear change for you.
Yeah, no. Rightly speaking, the National Grid and UK Power Network have apologised. There was an issue with an outage, which meant voltage was lost. For reasons your listeners will appreciate, the underground, our trains rely upon a huge amount of electricity. The voltage going down meant we couldn't provide a safe service, and I apologise to commuters who were inconvenienced, including me and people who work across London. TfL worked incredibly hard and got the tubes and trains running very quickly afterwards. And today, I've used the service this morning. There's full service running today. It does actually remind us of the importance of resilience in our infrastructure, and decades of underinvestment have led to these sorts of problems. Thankfully speaking, we didn't have the same challenges as Heathrow with flights, trains not going for a day, or Spain and Portugal. But I think it is worth us thinking about why we've got to invest in things we won't really see, like infrastructure, but when things go wrong, we experience bad things.
Explain the role of the Capital Fund to us in the context of things like this. Is it relevant?
It is in terms of supporting National Grid, UK Power Network in investing in these sorts of things, but we've got to think about the resilience of the infrastructure we have, and also investing in new infrastructure. And the comparison I give is, just imagine, during the Victorian times, nobody actually probably wanted sewers to be built, but thank God they built those sewers, because they lead to, us being able to live in this city in the way we can. And the same goes with stuff like infrastructure to do with gas, electricity, renewables, and so forth.
Should we take a call?
Sure. The first caller is from Croydon, and I think it's Anna.
Anas.
I beg your pardon.
It's Anas.
Apologies, Anas. Good morning. You okay?
Morning. Yeah, first time caller. My question was, what are your plans for housing for first time buyers?
And
it's a gear change, but
no, it's a very important gear change. But I think that the housing crisis, and I call it a crisis, is the biggest challenge facing our city. Frankly speaking, the supply of homes haven't met the demand, which is why the price has gone up for both renting and buying a home. So we, over the last few years, have been building on average 40 to 45,000 new homes a year. That's more homes completed than any time since the 1930s. But when I tell you over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to need, roughly speaking, 90,000 new homes a year, you'll appreciate the challenges that your generation faces in terms of a first-time buyer. So we're doing a number of things in terms of building on brownfield site, in other words, land already developed, making sure we work with councils to build council homes. What I announced last week, Anas, was for the first time ever, I'll be actively exploring the release of some parts of the Greenbelt. This is low-quality, badly maintained, poorly accessible land on the outskirts of our city, which is 3 times the size of London, with conditions. So what I'll be saying to developers and councils is this land will be released only if you maximise affordable housing, important to your generation and other Londonites. They're well built, good quality designs, good transport connectivity, improved biodiversity, energy efficient, and so forth. So we're going to carry on trying to break records with most homes being built and completed, but at the same time, Anas, for the first time in decades, actively explore the release of Greenbelt land.
How does it work when because we've got loads of building near me in Brentford, and some of it being delayed, and recent announcements that some groundbreaking moments have been postponed, and it often is about how much of it is affordable. Do the developers play kind of hardball on this? So when you tell them that they need to have, and I know affordable is a movable feast, but it's the only word we have. They tell you you tell them they need to provide X affordable, and they come back to you after signing the deal and say, oh, actually, we can't afford that.
Yeah, look, most developers are very sensible and very, and they're not unreasonable to make a profit. So the conversation we have, I'm just generalising, is, look, you want to make a profit, let's say for argument's sake, 15%. Well, if you want to get permission, you've got to build X percent of affordable homes, which means your profit goes down to 13% or 12%. It will still be viable for you, but the quid pro quo of getting permission is we need X percent of affordable. The councils work with us in relation to some of this. Some of the market value properties cross-subsidise affordable housing. But what you're alluding to, though, is really important. It's a perfect storm of challenges facing the sector. High interest rates, construction inflation, skills shortages, but also because of Grenfell, we're now requiring developers to build second staircases on tall buildings. They've got to make sure these homes are energy efficient. So there are challenges which this sector is facing, which is why we're lobbying the government for a big investment in the spending review coming up towards this sector, because they need support.
You mentioned skills shortages, and I know that the bricklayers, roofers, stonemasons, plumbers, carpenters still qualify for skilled workers visas after that white paper that you've read so assiduously. But the message that's been sent to some of those people is not exactly a welcome, Matt, is it?
3 sectors that I worry about is the construction sector, the care sector, and the health care sector. Why do I worry about them? Because we have record numbers of vacancies in these sectors. So there's 2 things we've got to do, in my view. One is, rapidly provide the skills training for, people to have the skills for the jobs being created. And the construction sector over the next few years, I think, is going to be booming. But secondly, recognise that with the best will in the world, we aren't going to get a queue of people wanting to be care workers or be working in the health sector. Why? A number of reasons. Pay's not great. The conditions aren't great. They've had years of under-investment. I've seen with my own eyes the difference a good care worker makes to somebody I love. She's not on a decent salary. She's going from looking after somebody I love to somebody else. And I think what the government, I'm hoping, will understand is actually some of these, lawful migrants who come here and do these jobs looking after our loved ones may not be done if there's a sudden exodus of some of these excellent care workers.
Well, the message yesterday was pretty clear that they will be issuing fewer, or they want to issue fewer visas in that space particularly, not so much on construction or health necessarily, but on social care. The Unison trade union said it was only the recruitment of workers from overseas that stopped the system from falling over. And we know that Jess McGregor from the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services has said that thousands of older and disabled people, as you know personally, rely on international workers for their care and support.
But that's why I welcome the fact that there was a white paper. What the government didn't do yesterday, which they could have done, is publish a bill which turns into an act of parliament. What they've done instead, which I support, is publish a white paper. The white paper allows us to respond to a consultation, and I'll be making sure that I represent the views of Londoners in these sectors in terms of responding to this white paper.
Have you spoken to Keir Starmer since the speech?
Since yesterday, no. No.
Should take another call.
And then the second caller is from Enfield, and I hope I get this name right. It's Chris, I'm hoping.
It's a bit easier.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
Hi there. So, Makan, as a Thames Water customer yourself, what's your view on the 31% rise in water bills, especially given their ongoing failures in service, environmental responsibility and lack of infrastructure investment? And I suppose, at what point do you think it's reasonable for consumers to say enough is enough and refuse to pay?
Well, it's funny you say that, because yesterday my direct debit went out for Thames Water, and it's huge. And, Thames Water for a number of years have been providing a poor quality service and charging Londoners like you and I obscene amounts of money to pay for a poor quality service. At the same time, James asked me the question about investing in infrastructure. They've not been investing in infrastructure in terms of reservoirs and so forth. So, although I've got no statutory powers over Thames Water, I have met the chief executive, the current one and the previous one. I've also met with Ofwat, who regulate the water industry. And, frankly, what the government has said as well to both Ofwat and Thames Water is that it's the last chance saloon. I'm not in favour, Chris, of the taxpayer subsidising shareholders and the owners by paying them lots of money to nationalise Thames Water. That may be an option further down the road. What's important, though, Chris, is that Thames Water understand they can't carry on expecting, users like you and I to bail out Thames Water. At the same time, in previous years, they've been paying record dividends to shareholders.
I mean, it's insane when you think about it. Chris is a little more measured, perhaps, than other people. It's absolutely bonkers when you describe it in the way that you have. And yet, as Chris has alluded to, we're all completely impotent. There's nothing we can do about it except refuse to pay, and then we get prosecuted.
Well, there's this step before that, which is to analyse how we got here, Chris. And, I don't want to get too ideological, but if you privatise a monopoly, don't be surprised if when that private company takes over the monopoly, they take you for a ride. Thames Water have been taking us for a ride for a long, long time. That's why I'm saying I think the last chance is a really important message. What we don't want is those that own Thames Water and the shareholders to refuse to invest in Thames Water, the important work around leaks, the important work in relation to sewage discharge, the important work in relation to reservoirs. So, the thin line being walked is give them the confidence to invest in Thames Water, but say to them, listen, unless you sort it out, don't be surprised if we come back and nationalise you.
Did you see that report in London Centric, Jim Waterson's new project, about the pipes that are pumping sewage into rivers because they've been installed incorrectly?
No, but
I'll get that in front of you. It's really interesting.
What I do know is actually in a number of homes across our city, the way plumbing's been done is, rainwater discharge, the pipes for that often have toilet discharge going to those. So what's happening is some of our toilet waste, think of your home, should be going to a different sewer, but they're going into where rainwater should be going. So we're doing a lot of works in relation to repairing that issue, which is really important in terms of sewage discharge. At the same time, things we can do in relation to runoff from our roads and so forth. I mentioned the Victorian sewers, Joseph Bazalgette.
Yeah.
We've just recently Thames Water have opened a new tideway tunnel, which will hopefully take away a lot of the discharge from our homes.
It's 22 minutes after 11. You're listening to the Mayor of London on LBC with me, James O'Brien. If you want to put a question to the Mayor, 0345 606 0973. It's a very, very busy switchboard this morning, but we'll try and free up a space for you by going to the next call.
Good morning. The next caller is from Battersea, near I know very well. Johnny, it's over to you.
Hi, Sadiq. We speak a lot about the supply side when it comes to the housing market, but I want to focus on the demand side.
Sure.
Lots of countries and cities around the world, they ban foreign investors from investing in residential property. Should we do the same in London?
So there's two answers to that. One is I'm in favour of when homes become available, Londoners having first dibs. So for the first 3 months, I think homes should only be marketed to Londoners, homes for Londoners, and I've got nothing against foreigners, so my best friends and family are foreigners, but I think we've got to recognise your point about demand, and Londoners are in desperate needs of new homes. So for X period, only Londoners can buy those homes. But that goes to my second point, which is, unfortunately, and James alluded to a scheme near him, the way the development sector works is often they provide homes in phases. And the way to get cash in is to sell properties off plan, often to overseas investors. So what happened, Johnny, is I'm a developer. I'm building 1,000 units of homes. I'll build 100 at a time first. And then they've not been completed, so you can't get a mortgage on those. But I'll sell them off plan to somebody in Hong Kong or Singapore or the Middle East. They'll buy those with cash without a mortgage. I can use that money to build my second 100 homes or my third 100 homes. Now, one of the things we've got to be doing to help the development sector is either allow mortgage companies here to give mortgages in advance of a home being completed, or find another way. This is the government supporting developers to finance these schemes. This could be borrowing or
well,
elsewhere.
how do other cities manage? How do other countries manage? Where they have some of the rules that Johnny describes.
Other cities across the globe are having similar problems. The urbanisation is meaning more and more people are moving to cities. So we're going to go from 45% now to about 55, 60% over the next 15 years. So if you speak to friends in New York, in Paris, in Milan, in LA, in Chicago, in San Francisco, they've got a massive housing crisis as well. That's urbanisation. That's why nothing wrong per se with growth. You've got to plan for the growth.
There's towns in Norfolk that have doubled the council tax of people who, if it's not their permanent residence. You could do that, couldn't you?
We can't do that. Sorry, councils can do that. Maximum double, that's not enough. I want councils to have the power to charge much more for leaving your property vacant. If you walk around parts of London, Johnny,
it's not just leaving it vacant, it's not being there all the time.
But actually, Johnny's in Battersea. Johnny, you go to Nine Elms, a lot of those properties there were built at like Gold Bricks investment. They've not been lived in because those who have bought it know equity will go up and the price of the flat will go up and they don't need to live there. Ones with great council, maximum they can charge is double council tax. Not being funny. If you can afford a flat and leave it empty, you can pay double council tax. I think boroughs should be allowed to charge much, much more. And we're lobbying the government to give councils more powers to disincentivise leaving a property empty.
It's funny, isn't it? I mean, you describe a perfect circle, don't you? A vicious circle. Because the only people that have got enough money to be able to afford it are the people who are doing the things that you describe, which explain why so many people can't get on the ladder. A, because they can't afford it, and B, because the inflation is caused by the people who can afford it.
But we can solve this problem, and that's what good government
by making it an unattractive investment for people who aren't going to live there or even rent it out.
Shouldn't be. Look, these are homes. Bricks and mortar should be homes for people to live in and have great memories rather than gold bricks to invest in.
26 minutes after 11 is the time. On the subject of building, you've got your eyes on the Green Belt. It was announced last week, actively exploring building on some of London's Green Belt. That's a U-turn, isn't it?
It is. And let me explain why I've changed my view in relation to the Green Belt. We now have a government that's supporting London in terms of the homes we need, but also look at the numbers. Look, over the next 10 years, independent analysis says we need around 88,000 homes a year, roughly speaking, new homes a year. We've completed more homes than the 1930s, but it's about 45,000 per year. So there's a delta, a gap between the homes we're building, completing more time than any, the record numbers since the 1930s, and the homes we need. Even if we build on every piece of brownfield site in London, pre-developed land, we don't get anywhere near 88,000. So I'm not saying I'm going to build in your gorgeous park wherever you live in Chiswick or Battersea or wherever. We're not going to build on great green land in London. A lot of the Green Belt is poorly maintained, bad quality, and inaccessible to Londoners. Only 13% of the Green Belt is parks and spaces accessible to Londoners. So we will be actively exploring those parts of the Green Belt, and we'll have conditions, though. It won't be, a free-for-all. Conditions in relation to building that Green Belt.
It's a misunderstood phrase, isn't it? It's a misunderstood term, Green Belt. It doesn't mean that by definition sort of leafy idylls and glades and valleys.
See, I assumed
I did as
years ago, green and pleasant,
all of that.
Rich in wildlife. And then we analysed the Green Belt. Actually, look at the history of the Green Belt. The Green Belt was designated Green Belt to avoid urban sprawl, to avoid towns merging, and so forth. And I think we've got to recognise that actually a lot of the Green Belt is poor quality. Some is great and lush, and we're going to make sure that stays the case. A lot of it isn't.
28 after 11. Let's take another call.
The next call is from Orpington. Sonny, over to you.
Hello, how are you, Mayor?
I'm good. Sunny by name and sunny by nature, hey?
Yeah.
As is the weather outside LBC.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my question to you is regarding that yesterday's statement by Prime Minister. If you are the Prime Minister, will you make such comment that the way Britain is going to become an island for foreigner. And again, with such remark, make it difficult for people like you to become a leader in Labour.
Well, Sonny, I won't deal with the mischief making in your question. I'll deal with the substance of your point, if that's okay, which is, look, it's really important that I share my experiences as not just the child of immigrants, but as somebody born and raised in this city, and I've seen the contribution migrants have made. But let's look at the stats and the evidence. Whether you look at the OECD, PwC, the government's own Migration Advisory Committee, so a skilled migrant will contribute on average £16,000 a year towards our economy, and that's when you include the public services he or she may use. By the way, compare that to a Brit skilled worker, that's £800 minus the public services they use. And here's the lovely stat, Sonny, which you'll enjoy. A skilled migrant's family will contribute to the British economy £12,000 a year. That's even when you take away public services they use. A British skilled worker's family takes from the economy £4,400 when you include public services they use. So the idea that skilled migrants are sponges or skivers isn't the case. But when you go to M&S or the Body Shop or have a Cobra, all these things were set up by migrants. And I meet businesses all the time, Sonny, as you do. More than a third of the fastest growing businesses in the UK are either founded or co-founded by migrants. So I speak from personal experience, Sonny, not just as the son of migrants, not just as somebody born and raised in the city, but as the mayor of this great city, to see the contribution made by successive waves of migrants. That being said, Sonny, I also recognise we need to control our borders. I also recognise that the promises made by Brexiteers wasn't worth the air they took making these promises, and we've got to call them out in terms of net migration figures over the last few years. And that's why it's really important to, be pro the contribution made by immigrants, but also recognise we need controls over our borders.
So you wouldn't have made the speech yesterday or used the language that Keir Starmer used. I think that is clear. And indeed, you've said it yourself. The question about whether or not you would use this as an opportunity to contemplate leadership yourself of the Labour Party, you describe as mischief making, but a lot of people listening will be interested. You're still a relatively young man. This is your third term as mayor, unprecedented third term as mayor. When will we know whether you fancy a fourth?
We'll wait and see nearer the next election. I only won a history-making, record-breaking landslide victory a few months ago. So let's wait and see what the future holds.
I think we've got time for another call.
Absolutely. Let's take another call. And this one's from Harrow, and it's William. Morning, William.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. I just want to know, as an eminent member of the Labour Party, can you explain to me, please, the silence over the slaughter in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? The Israeli army now are knocking down houses and bringing in bulldozers. Is there a word about it? No. The Gaza Strip has been bombed, I think, for the third time. Children's blood is all over the place and in the rubble. Is there a word about it? No. Why is that?
Look, William, I'm somebody who, does believe that what Hamas did on October the 7th was wrong, and I think the hostages should be released and the bodies of those who were taken should be released. At the same time, I think the behaviour of the Israeli government and the IDF is not acceptable. I think when you speak to those who have either been in Gaza or indeed the West Bank, they will tell you of some of the horrors over the last few years. I think when you have a situation where humanitarian aid, this is not luxury suits being stopped and getting into Gaza or televisions. This is food and medicines now being stopped by the Israelis getting into Gaza, where you've got experts saying there are now people on the cusp of starvation, the potential of epidemics being caused. You got to call it out. And I think the behaviour of Netanyahu, the behaviour of his government, the behaviour of the IDF should be called out. And I think what's really important is people like you carry on reminding the world about what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, because they'll be forgotten about because of all the geopolitics. You can see President Trump in the Middle East today. I'm hoping when he's in Saudi Arabia today, he's in Qatar over the next few days and the UAE, that'll be an opportunity for President Trump to hear loudly and clearly the views of those respective countries, and he uses his influence over Netanyahu to stop this. It is heartbreaking and heart-wrenching when you see and hear these stories every day. And by the way, I began this answer, William, by deliberately talking about the hostages, because some people say you can't be sympathetic to both. I think you can. I think you can criticise Hamas and condemn them, but also say Netanyahu is behaving in a way that's despicable.
I think he was asking more about the silence from the Labour government.
Look, William, listen, the way diplomacy works, I'm sure the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister are speaking to their respective colleagues in Israel and elsewhere to exert their influence. I know from the media, I don't discuss this with the Foreign Secretary or Prime Minister, but that David Lammy was meeting with France and Germany and other countries to discuss this issue very recently. You'll see, William, what President Macron has said in relation to Palestine as well. So, don't forget, we only get to see what happens in the public forum. But I've no doubt at all, both the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary are raising, the concerns that I've articulated, behind closed doors.
That's a bit. I mean, it may be true, but it's unlikely to satisfy William and many other people listening that the things that aren't being done in public, which many people want to see in public, include a defence that, they're almost certainly being done in private.
I just don't know. Sorry, William, I wasn't being disingenuous. I just simply don't know what's being done. What happens?
Well, what would you do if you were Foreign Secretary? You've got the senior members of the United Nations now using the word genocide. I had Kenneth Roth on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, who, as you know, spent 30 years running Human Rights Watch. No one's done more to stand up to despots and appalling conduct than he has, and he used the word genocide in my interview.
And you've seen what the ICC and ICJ have respectively said, and things have got worse, not better, since their preliminary judgment. William, let me tell you two personal experiences. I spoke to somebody during Ramadan who was here from Gaza, and separately I met somebody recently who's here from West Bank. And they said, don't underestimate the fact that when we hear about people talking about Palestine outside of Palestine, the difference it makes to us, the fact that people haven't forgotten us. So I'm not patronising you, William, but the fact that you're raising this in a public radio show is really important. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we've all got the power to lobby the government, me included. If we think the government aren't doing enough on this issue, we can lobby the government. And I'd encourage, all your listeners, James, and I've said this before in terms of the white paper, we live in the joy of a democracy, and the joy of pluralism is we can lobby our politicians to ask them to do more. And I think it is important that we put pressure on, all governments to say to Israel, listen, the view people have of the Israeli government is not going up as a consequence of your actions, it's going down. But on a daily basis, people are dying. Starvation and the deaths because of illness aren't inevitable, they're preventable, and they're man-made. The catastrophe in Gaza and the West Bank is man-made.
And you can go further than the government can, because you're not involved in any diplomatic attempts to stay the hand of Benjamin Netanyahu.
No, I answer the question as truthfully as I can and as openly as I can, as I always try and do on Speak to Sadiq.
One more call, I think.
Yeah, great. The next caller is from Westminster, and it's Hassan. Good morning, Hassan.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam.
Good morning. Since we're talking about Israel, do you think what is happening in Gaza is genocide? And then I actually wanted to ask about the rise of reform, but please, if you can clarify the genocide question.
Well, as I said to James, when the preliminary judgment came out from the ICC and ICJ, they said it's plausible. I think things have got worse, not better, since then.
So, is it genocide, Sadiq?
I've been quite clear.
The Green Party thinks it is. Corbyn thinks it is. There are lots of people in ICJ, Human Rights Watch, others are saying this. Can you say the word?
Well, Hassan, it's quite clear what ICJ and ICC said. They said it's plausible genocide. And what I'm saying to you, things have got worse, not better, since then.
Okay, so you're not saying the word. Okay, thank you. Can you tell us how you're going to fight the rise of reform, which has done very well and is projected to make serious inroads in London?
Well, I don't think reform are pro-Palestine, Hassan. That's the first thing. Nor do I think I've heard Farage raise any concerns about the human rights of the Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank. So it's really important that we, compare the current Prime Minister to that person who may be the future Prime Minister on this sort of issue. The second point I'd make is this. Look, people who vote reform for a number of reasons. One of the reasons they vote reform is because of their unhappiness. They can't get decent housing. They see their loved ones not getting decent healthcare. Their children can't get into a decent school. They can't afford, the quality of life that they'd like to receive. And so what the job of government is nationally, and the job of me in London is to address the concerns people have and, deliver quickly on some of the issues that matter to them. So in London, for example, free school meals for every child that goes to a primary state school helps with the cost of living crisis. Freezing bus and tram fares helps with the cost of living crisis. Building council homes helps with the challenges raised by the rise of the parties for a very good reason. And I think the government's got to do two things. One is to reflect on why reform did so well last week, and then address the issues underlying that by delivering even faster on some of the challenges we face as a country. 14 years of austerity, 14 years of a lack of investment in the NHS, in schools, in affordable housing and so forth has led to a situation where reform are doing so well.
Hassan, thank you. It's coming up to 20 to 12. I pushed you at the beginning of the interview on your feelings, which I don't often do with politicians, about some of the words that Keir Starmer used yesterday. I'll do the same thing again if I may, but not about words that he used, something that has happened to him. Arrest this morning has been made of a 21-year-old man over suspected arson attacks on 2 properties linked to Sir Keir Starmer and a car. These, and as I say, an arrest has been made. These are threats that some politicians live with, or dangers, risks that some politicians live with on a daily basis.
Well, the point I'd make to this issue is, look, don't underestimate the ripples of fear that, Keir's quite stoic, but, Vic and the kids felt when they'll have read this stuff in the paper, right? But for the grace of God. And yes, they are safe, thankfully, in Downing Street. They've got a protection team with them, but they will have felt scared, frightened. The neighbours on this street, horrified. I want to thank and commend the police for their swift action, but also the London Fire Brigade as well. But it can't be right that any politician and their family faces these sorts of threats. And the context is that in the last 10 years, we've had 2 politicians losing their lives in this country, David Amess and Joe Cox, of course. We've had other politicians like Stephen Timms stabbed, and other politicians requiring 24-hour security from police experts who, and I just say, listen, it's really important to have a robust debate. I'm always ready to be questioned by you and by your listeners. We're doing a public fora. It's really important to lobby your MP, go and protest, go on demonstrations, sign petitions, vote for the other party, or don't if that's what you want to do. But I mean, when you've got a situation where this has happened, and then you see things on public, platforms, social media, where others are saying, well, it could have, the suspect could be any one of 70 million Brits. We can understand why this happened. And you think that can't be right. And so I think it is important, to understand and empathise with the challenges a politician and his or her family faces without necessarily agreeing with their politics.
Is it worse now than when you started in politics?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Just much more feedback.
So I became a member of Parliament in 2005. And I had an office in Tooting. I do regular casework. I make decisions all the time. I speak to MPs now. They've got panic buttons in their office. They've got CCTV in their offices. They don't have surgeries often. And I could go on for very good reasons, by the way, not because they're work shy or because they don't want to work, but because threats are made and so forth. And the problem is this: people may assume, when somebody's saying horrible comments or making threats on social media, it doesn't really matter. No, it does, because that person could turn up physically and do harm, but it radicalises and normalises this sort of stuff, which I think is wrong. And here's a problem, James. If your son or daughter, nephew or niece, or somebody you speak to in a school is thinking about a career in politics, thinking about public service, thinking about putting their head above the parapet, they'll say, why bother? I mean, why would you advise anybody to become a politician, to get involved in public service when they see this happening to politicians and their families?
11:43, thank you. We'll see you next month.
Always a pleasure.
So Sadiq Khan, thank you very much for your time. It means we're slightly late for the very latest news headlines with Dominic Ellis.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:47 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we will shortly learn a very troubling story about your NHS data and its possible future. But before that, I just want to run through a couple of other things that have beeped on my radar this morning, because I know you don't have as much time as I do to wade through the news. There's a mad story, and it oddly made me think of J.D. Vance. A British analyst has been sentenced to 10 years in a Saudi prison for posting a tweet I'm literally, and they believe, although they haven't told the accused, the convicted, or his family exactly what the tweet was, but they believe it may have been one that he posted some years ago and subsequently deleted. So I don't know how this works, but I read in the article that the same court had previously sentenced offenders to death for social media posts. And the reason why it made me think of J.D. Vance was because Donald Trump arrives in Saudi Arabia today, if he hasn't already, where one of his sons has been seeking to do very, very lucrative business on behalf of the family firm. Cue your regular reminder that Jimmy Carter put the family peanut farm into a blind trust so he couldn't be accused of conflicts of interest. Donald Trump's son has been in Saudi Arabia recently trying to set up very, very lucrative business deals, and Donald Trump arrives today in a country where you can be literally sentenced to death for a social media post. But remember that J.D. Vance thinks that we've got a problem in this country. I just sometimes wonder whether I'm going mad or the world is, and this is one of those moments where I'm pretty confident it's not me. It's the world. And the story that I forgot to share with you yesterday, staying with matters Donald Trump, was the very uplifting tale of Donald Trump throwing open the borders of America to refugees. I thought that was a lovely... Oh, hang on. I forgot to tell you, this is a 24-hour hook and tease, but the refugees, and I use the word advisedly, that Donald Trump is inviting into the United States are white South Africans. So there is a welcome for refugees in the United States, but only for white South Africans. Make of that what you will. 11:49 is the time. Speaking of white South Africans, or certainly people with backgrounds in South Africa, Peter Thiel is a name that you're hearing more and more, the billionaire major Trump donor and widely perceived to be an architect of much of what Project 2025 stands for, has been the subject of another fascinating investigation by our friends at Democracy for Sale, namely Peter Geoghegan. And I've heard a lot about Palantir, the sort of spy technology firm. I've heard a lot about Peter Thiel, and I've heard about both of them in the context of the NHS, but not for the reasons that you're focused on in your latest report.
Yeah, so the background to this, James, is some listeners might remember back in around 2020, Palantir signed a contract to start working with the NHS during COVID, and they very generously signed a contract for just a princely sum of £1. So they signed a contract that we're going to help you. This is kind of how Palantir generally operates. Fast forward 3 years, and the Conservative government gives Palantir a contract for £330 million to build what they call a federated data platform for the NHS. And so the NHS is a huge data trove. 65 million people's health records. Yeah. It's a huge amount of health
Why is it so valuable?
Well, because actually it's really interesting. I was speaking to somebody...
Is it Thiel or Thiel?
Thiel.
I thought so.
Yeah, so Peter Thiel, which is actually hard for me to say with my Irish accent, but I'm going to continue doing it.
You're doing grand.
Why it's so valuable because there isn't. It's lots of health data is quite segmented. It's lots of countries have privatised health services, like say France, it's insurance health service. What you've got in the UK is this amazing amount of very data you can match. So it really is very valuable. And so Palantir was given this contract to build this data platform for the NHS. It was very controversial at the time. Some people might remember there's a lot of concerns about privacy. You know, Palantir it's a very secretive company. It does a lot of work for a lot of defence work. Actually, just last week, a bunch of former Palantir employees wrote an open letter saying that the company is violating its own ethical standards. And why is that? Because it's helping build software for the Trump White House to track migrants, many of whom are subsequently deported. So this is a company.
Some of those deportations being illegal, of course.
Yes, indeed, many many of these legal deportations. So the background of all this is concerning about Palantir, a concerning company. But what was really interesting with our investigation, we actually started looking at, well, what's it like? You know, how's this platform working now? It's 18 months down the line, this contract has been signed. And by the NHS's own stats, by the end of last year, less than a quarter of hospitals were using the software. And actually, Palantir says itself that's up to less than a third. So it's still the vast majority aren't using the software. And we with lots of freedom of information requests. And what you could see actually was lots of health trusts saying, look, this just isn't very useful. The functionality isn't there for us. It isn't providing, because this was supposed to be absolutely path-breaking technology. It's why we were told we needed Palantir. Lots of questions were raised about the ethics of this company, but we needed them because they could do something better than anybody else. But it looks, at least from people inside the NHS health trusts, people in hospitals, actually, that this technology just isn't really cracked up, at the moment, isn't what it's cracked up to be.
Why does this matter?
I think it matters massively because this is a company, it's a company that has a huge, real question marks about it, about how it operates. As I say, like last week you had these people, former employees resigning, and I think people rightly have a real question about what happens to their data, what happens to their health data. And it begs questions, I think, about how Palantir is operating in the UK, because what we've seen is this is a company that's become very, very politically connected. Yes, it was the Conservatives who gave them the £330 million contract, but they've hired former Labour and Conservative ministers. We just reported last week on Democracy for Sale that
Peter Mandelson take a contract from them.
Peter Mandelson's lobbying firm Global Counsel has worked for Palantir. They don't name their clients, so we don't know if they currently are. Okay. But what was really striking in February, I'm sure listeners remember when Keir Starmer went on a big trip to Donald Trump to the White House. After that trip, he went to visit Palantir's offices with Peter Mandelson. We actually also know that the head of Palantir UK, Louis Mosley, he was actually present at the February trade talks between Trump and Starmer. So this is an incredible level of access for what is essentially increasingly an arm of the US state in many respects. It's a very big, it's the amount of contracts it has with the United States are huge. And with Thiel, it is massively embedded. Like Thiel founded a company. He's a minority shareholder now. He still chairs the board. And he has become one of the most influential people, a Trump whisperer more than almost anybody else.
Is it a bit unfair to expect great progress to have been made in as few as 18 months, Peter?
I think that's a fair question. We put it to Palantir, and they made a fair point, which was that it takes a long time to roll out these things. Actually, that's why KPMG, the consultants, were given an £8 million contract to help with the rollout.
What does that mean? Because, of course, Democracy for Sale in many ways exists to investigate how public money is spent and often squandered, as well as how special interests shape and distort our politics. I know that because it's your tagline. But on that point there, what do you get £8 million for? Just to encourage people to take up the thing that you've already told them to take up? It sounds like nice work if you can get it.
It's worth mentioning as well that these are consultancies that the Labour government said they were going to completely clamp down on, and actually have done the exact opposite. So again, Palantir would say, and they said to us, look, this was always going to be part of the rollout of this. We had agreed there would be consultancy contracts, so that's what's happening. But what's striking is if you look at and talk to experts in the field, people within the NHS, and there's an open letter actually from NHS data specialists earlier this year that basically just said that the problem with the federated data platform is it's just not giving more functionality than what we have already. And I think that's a big question, given the kind of cutbacks we're talking about in the UK. How are we spending public money? And we've seen this time and again with NHS contracts. You might remember the Conservative donor Frank Hester, his company Phoenix, they were making operating profits of 40% on largely on government contracts. There's nothing illegal about that, but they are high margin, high value contracts.
This is the bloke who dreamed about Diane Abbott being hurt.
Yes, that's and that's how his company operated. And it's very striking that Palantir, for all Peter Thiel's talk about wanting to basically take apart the state, he's a very big small state person. He calls himself a libertarian. Palantir's business model is really predicated purely on public contracts. It really is all about getting access to large value public contracts. And what you see, I think, with this contract is a way of working that I think begs lots of questions about other contracts that Palantir has. It's got many other contracts with the UK government.
Fingers in many pies, and not just the UK government. You probably know more about this than I do, but Storebrand Asset Management, which is one of the Nordic region's largest investors, sold its holdings in Palantir last year because of concerns that their work for Israel might put the asset manager at risk of violating international humanitarian law and human rights.
And healthcare workers in the UK have been protesting against Palantir's work in the West Bank and in Gaza as well. And this is something that the company has. It says it doesn't. It operates ethically and all the etc. But there has been real concerns about the work that Palantir has been doing, because what they are able to do, they do a lot of work for what we call ICE. I'm sure lots of listeners heard of ICE as well, which is effectively the border force for the US. They do a lot of what we call predictive predictive modelling, predictive surveillance technology, and now we can see that they've been working with ICE for a long time, and ICE really are at the forefront of Donald Trump's deportations, which, as you say, many of which are illegal, and that this company is also operating a large data store for the NHS, and that we are seeing what, at least the very least, looks like a very slow rollout of it, with questions about its functionality.
It's fascinating. I mean, Democracy for Sale is the name of your organisation for a reason, because it is almost, I don't know if you know this, my favourite ever analogy came up during Brexit, but it applies to lots of things. Like trying to get out of the European Union sensibly would be like trying to take the eggs out of a baked cake. And so many fingers in so many pies, it now reaching into so many areas internationally, not just in the United Kingdom, of that interplay between public sector and private sector, that it almost becomes impossible to take a stance and say, as this Nordic investor has done, Storebrand in Oslo has done, it becomes almost impossible for governments to say, actually, we don't want anything to do with these people, because we've gone so far down the road of cooperation and contracts that we can't now go backwards. And
I think that's why, I write about it in the piece, myself and my colleague Lucas Amin, who wrote it, talk about it. It's really important to understand how they operate, how someone like this company operates. So you've got your £1 free COVID, we're here to help. That was the message from Palantir in 2020. We're here to help. This is a crisis. We're here to help the NHS. What you then, if effectively NHS, you hook there's a bit of a peddler aspect to it. You then hook your potential client on your software, on your technology, and you sell them up. You sell them up and sell them up and sell them up. And at the same time, you take advantage. Palantir have now got a slew of senior British politicians or former politicians working for them.
Tom Watson's there, I think.
Tom Watson's there. Leo Doherty, we just reported last week, ex-defence minister, has joined as a paid advisor. There's a lot of people from the Ministry of Defence, and that's actually where Palantir are going to be looking, I would say, more than even the NHS at this point in the UK. We're going to see a huge explosion in defence contracts on the back of, wrong choice of words there, huge rather explosion, a huge increase in defence contracts, I would expect, because of our commitments now to increase our defence spending, and Palantir, that will be, I think, where Palantir are looking next.
I was busy on Sunday morning, but I presume that when the UK head of Palantir, Louis Mosley, appeared on Laura Kuenssberg's programme, I presume that he was robustly questioned on at least some of these points.
No, it's worth having a listen back to it. No, Joe Stiglitz, who's on the show with him, actually does do quite a decent job of asking him some tough questions, so it's probably worth listening back to just for that.
Peter Geoghegan, many thanks indeed. People can find out more about Democracy for Sale in all the usual ways. Just Google it, really. But it is a Substack, and they need your help in keeping up this work, which Alan points out has been really important, and they're very grateful to you for doing it. Although we have started a bit of... Is there a definitive answer to the question of how you pronounce his surname?
There is.
Because Jonathan says it's Thiel. His surname is German, a language that lacks the TH fricative. There's a beautiful word.
Oh, that's very useful.
Yeah,
that's even better for me.
Yeah.
If it's just Thiel, I don't even have to sit here, and my brain doesn't have to engage itself to go, make the TH sound, make the TH sound.
It's all about the fricatives. It's 12 noon.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Oh, this is a first. I've got a missing word round for you from an LBC colleague, from an interview conducted by Tom Swarbrick yesterday. I wonder if you can guess what this is. Deputy Green Party leader admits to performing hypnotherapy to enlarge blank in the past. Do you know what that is? Do you know, if it wasn't actually on the LBC website, I'd think somebody had got the wrong end of the stick on this one. You can only play if you don't know the answer. Remember, you've got to have a genuine guess, a good faith guess. Deputy Green Party leader admits to performing hypnotherapy to, quotes, enlarge, end quotes, blank in the past. I did not see that one coming. I'll tell you that for nothing. 4 minutes after 12. And I think I did see this coming. I am not going to embarrass any colleagues in the course of this conversation. But I've had an experience in the last 24 hours that is up there with the one that I had when I was doing jury service. So I know I've told this story many times, but just because you listen so religiously doesn't mean that everybody else does. So I'll have to tell it again. When I was sort of doing jury service back in February, I made some wonderful friends. I did a little book signing on one of the days. I never actually got put on a jury, and I found myself very impressed by the calm way in which quite a large operation was conducted. It's a wonderful democratic exercise. It's the only thing you're compelled to do as a citizen of these islands. You're not compelled to vote. You don't have to vote. We don't have conscription. in terms of an exercise of your democratic duty, jury service is actually the only thing. And that's why I was quite gutted not actually. I got on 2 juries, and then they both got disbanded the next morning. Or I got on anyway. You're not interested in that side of things. I was sitting at my table with my new friend, having a bit of a chinwag, and could not help. And then I think his jury got called, so I got my phone out to do a crossword, and I could not help but overhear a conversation at the next table. And the conversation at the next table involved, which I could hear at first before, looking surreptitiously over, a recent arrival. So this was week 2, and it was someone who recognised a former colleague and came over to talk to them, sat down at the table. And within 5 to 10 minutes of literally meeting one former colleague who she clearly didn't know that well, and 2 other people at the table who she had not previously met at all, she was telling them with extraordinary confidence that Michelle Obama was a man, as in the wife of the former president, that Michelle Obama was a man. And now you will understand that at this point my ears pricked up. I sort of thought, what? This is a lot more interesting than my crossword. And so I tuned in to the conversation. I caught the eye of the person sitting next to her. And it was like, that thing? Well, you'd need to watch it back on YouTube to see. It was like that. You're one of those ones. You know what? That you sort of just make your eyes bigger. You don't roll your eyes. You just sort of go, whoa. And the former colleague, the fellow that was sitting at the table with, he sort of went, oh, really? And I had no way of knowing whether, if I'd been able to catch his eye, whether he'd have done that whoa thing as well, or whether he was actually potentially persuadable or interested in what she was saying. And the conversation went on. She went, yes, look, here's the proof. And she passed her phone around the table. And at this point, I became quietly confident that everybody else thought she was as bonkers as I did, because I think one of them said, oh, gosh, you never would have guessed, would you? Oh, that's interesting. And then I forget what happened, but the conversation drifted. And about 4 minutes later, she's back again with the claim that all of the money that we are sending to Ukraine to help the Ukrainian people repel the illegal invasion by Vladimir Putin, all of the money had been spent on super yachts for the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky. So much so, in fact, that he is now the owner, I heard, of the 3 most expensive super yachts in the world. He owns all 3 of them. I was reminded briefly of J.K., the star of Jamiroquai. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He was huge when I was a showbiz journalist. Brilliant musician. Acid jazz, I guess you'd call it, or funk. And he was also a very, very passionate advocate for the environment, which made it a little bit tricky for him to justify the ownership of about 10 supercars. And I always found myself thinking, why do you want to... You can only drive 1 car at a time. And that was the argument he used when he was criticised for his alleged environmental hypocrisy. How can you be a friend of the environment if you own 10 supercars? And he said, well, I only drive 1 at a time. And there is a sort of ineluctable logic to that, in a way. But this, I don't know. No one asked why he needed 3. Why do you need 3 super yachts? Do you have? I mean, you've got 1 and you've got a spare for when one's in the garage. What's the 3rd one for? But it was the absolute confidence and certainty with which she stated it in a public place where you might have felt that eccentricity would be discouraged. It's a jury room. It's a jury room. Would you want that woman on your jury or not? If you were guilty and you had a decent lawyer, the fact that she could be persuaded to believe absolutely anything might perhaps work in your favour. But equally, if you were innocent and you didn't have a decent lawyer, then and the prosecution was a genius, then she's the kind of person that would be no doubt first in the jury deliberations to state that she was absolutely convinced of your guilt, and then she could pass a phone around the room. I know you're not allowed your phones in the thingamy, but proof positive that not only is Michelle Obama a man and Volodymyr Zelensky has spent all the money on super yachts, but finally also that you are guilty. And she knows because she just does. So that's a little bit of background. And we talked about it recently, and quite a few of you got in touch with me to say you need to talk about this more. You need to talk about this more. And so we are, but not because of that, because we've now had almost the perfect counterpoint, almost the perfect partner to that story. I was sitting at work yesterday, and remember, this is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. This is a reputable, respectable, and ever more popular source of opinion, conversation, information, and crucially, news. I was working, and I will not give any more clues than to say that it was somebody in a senior position on a major LBC daytime program. Not the biggest, obviously, because that's us, but on a good, daytime program. So punching, all right? And I heard them say to someone else, have you seen the footage of Macron and the cocaine? And to their enormous credit, although, frankly, I expect no less, my colleague responded by saying, don't be ridiculous. What are you talking about? And this person had seen footage online showing a small package of what appeared to be cocaine on a table in front of Emmanuel Macron, a table at which Sir Keir Starmer was also sitting, and the footage showed him sort of snatching at the package of cocaine, which is a white powder, I'm told, snatching at the package of cocaine and stuffing it into his pocket, all miraculously caught on camera and then leaked. Now, right now, what are you doing? Not literally, I'm washing your socks or something, but what are you thinking right now about that story? Because if this is news to you, there's more. But if it's not news to you, what is your immediate reaction? So LBC newsroom, colleague, respectable, big job, seen this footage, thinks it's true, thinks it's real. What do you think? Yeah, well, it probably was, James. Oh my days, how did he get a job on show? What is your immediate reaction? It's very similar to me sitting in the jury room. And presumably somebody somewhere would have gone, good God, I think Michelle Obama might be a man. I must do my own research. Or, gosh, I heard yesterday that Volodymyr Zelensky spent all the money on super yachts. Or, no, Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer were doing coke together because I've seen the footage. I know that it's real. The story reaches the Daily Mail today in creditable fashion, to be fair to them, and it's newsworthy because Macron has issued a denial. So spare yourself tuppence for complaining about that. It's newsworthy precisely because Macron has had to address it. It was so viral that the Elysée felt compelled to intervene. I don't know whether that was the right decision or not, because I don't know whether the kind of people that believe this happily, my colleague is now confident that it was not cocaine on the table in front of Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer. But the majority of people who fall for this crapola are possibly not as easily dissuaded from their delusion. But that's why it's newsworthy. So the Mail go for Keir and Macron's cocaine party on a train to Ukraine, which is an eye-catching headline, isn't it? If nothing, Keir and Macron's cocaine party on a train to Ukraine. Good Lord, I must read more. Oh, and proof no online conspiracy theory is too bonkers to be lapped up by millions. And that is why it takes me straight back to the jury room. Because you would have thought, and perhaps once, you would have believed that this would not be taken seriously by anybody. Do you know, I'm just reading further down the story. Here it is. Last year, conspiracy theories claiming that Zelensky used US aid to buy 2 luxury yachts were repeated by members of US Congress, with the result that the US aid package to Ukraine was temporarily stalled. So that woman in the jury room was part of a very real and major problem. People believing this nonsense going all the way up to the floor of the US Congress, because it is almost certain that this footage was disseminated by the Russians. An army of AI chatbots peddling pro-Kremlin falsehoods online are now reaching parts that they have never previously reached. A recent report revealed that Pravda, the Russian disinformation site which targets Britons, has posted more than 47,000 English language articles since it was created in November. That's what you see. One French-language pro-Russian account commented, Coke is going to take decisions on the Third World War. It is obviously a tissue. Even the most cursory examination will show you that it's a white plastic coffee stirrer and a tissue, a slightly manky tissue on the table in front of Macron, which is obviously why he scoops it up and stuffs it in his pocket when he realises that it is being filmed. Merz is there as well, the German Chancellor, a grandfather of 7 who had a tricky week and so possibly, as the Daily Mail journalist writes today, possibly decided that he wanted to let his hair down. The Telegraph goes rather differently on this. And this actually worried me slightly. A tissue of lies, : Macron denies taking cocaine with world leaders. And that is why denying it can be a problem. You're accused of something absolutely rid. So there's 2 phone-ins here, by the way. I'll tell you what they are in a minute. You deny something, it's not the Streisand effect, is it? But it probably has a name. Someone accuses you of something absolutely ridiculous. Someone accuses me of being the secret president of the Daniel Hannan fan club. And if I go to the trouble of denying it, it reaches more people than it would have done if I hadn't. And you know what they say. There's no smoke without fire, or whatever the phrase may be. So I'm issuing an official denial that I was using cocaine on a train to Kyiv for a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky. Oh, sorry, that bit's important because that's one of the reasons why Russians would be keen to get that lie out there. And the way they've written it is... Well, I think it's pretty irresponsible, actually. First line of the Telegraph's article, and remember, the Mail has got bonkers in the headline. The Telegraph's article goes with, Emmanuel Macron has denied bringing cocaine onto a train headed to Kyiv for a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine's European allies. The French president's office yesterday took the unusual step of addressing a video that showed him hiding a white object as he sat alongside Sir Keir Starmer and Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor. The footage taken before the meeting on Sunday had gone viral over the weekend owing to the mystery object's apparent resemblance to a bag of the Class A substance. Even the Russian foreign minister talked about the fate of Europe being decided by utterly drug-dependent individuals, and of course accused Mr. Zelensky of being an unstable drug addict. Alex Jones, one of Nigel Farage's friends and frequent collaborators, has joined in immediately, trumpeting the Russian claims and calling the Ukrainian leader a known cocaine enthusiast. They're all libelous and all lies, but I don't suppose there's any point suing Alex Jones because the last people that sued him supposedly bankrupted him. Oh, they were the parents of children murdered in a school massacre that he claimed were liars. Again, timely moment to remind you that Farage used to have a season ticket for his internet show. I wasn't expecting to ask you the second of these 2 questions, which is a straight option on whether or not you think that the denial was a mistake by Macron because it kind of draws more attention to the story than it otherwise would have done. But at some point, the world we inhabit is going to have to break down the barrier between the online madness and the real world reality. And it may be that this story is that point, because so many people believe the stuff that's online that those of us who still see a distinction between real media and online lies need a little bit of help. Isn't it? It's quite a strange one. Here you go. James believes it. Oh, so everyone has to believe you, Mr. O'Brien. If it was so innocent, why take it off the table like you're stealing? Should have just left it there. You know, nothing to hide. Well, it's a tissue. It's a dirty tissue. And it's also really easy to see. But there's James, determined to believe that Emmanuel Macron, Friedrich Merz and Keir Starmer all sat in a room with a big bag of Coke on the table as if that was the most normal thing in the world. And that's what James wants to believe. The effort that you have to put into wanting to believe that is extraordinary. And the only circumstances in which I could imagine anybody believing it is, oddly enough, if they had taken a large amount of mind-bending drugs. But here is someone listening to the same radio programme that you're listening to. It is the Streisand effect, isn't it? Sort of. By drawing attention to something, you make the problem much worse. With her, it was a beach house. Someone published a picture of her beach house. She complained, saying she didn't want any pictures of her beach house being published. And every newspaper in the world published an article about how she didn't want any pictures of this beach house being published. So I don't know if it fits into that. And I don't know how many Jameses are listening. Oh, so everyone has to believe you. Mate, it is not even... this is why I was astonished to find it happening in the LBC newsroom yesterday. So I can't be that rude to James, except for the fact, of course, that as soon as my colleague gave his head a wobble, he realised that it was a load of old hokum. But everything is up for grabs now. Everything is negotiable. And let's focus on the people that want to believe it. Okay, and I'm going to be fascinated by the contents of my inbox this hour, because I think what I learned... Here you go. Helen says, I had respect for you until today. It was Coke. Because what I learned in that jury room in February was that it is no longer true that the only people who believe this bilge are people who walk around wearing tinfoil hats, leaving, I don't know, secret messages on toilet walls and giving all their money to David Icke. These things are no longer, I don't know, safe. I don't know what the word is. So why? 0345 60 973. Why are people so desperate to believe this? Why would anybody in Isleworth want to believe, to the point of suspending any normal critical faculties, that Volodymyr Zelensky was a drug-addled yacht collector? I know why the Russian administration want people to believe it, but what do the subscribers to the online conspiracy theories get out of it? And you're going to tell me this because you are one, you were one, or you know one. All right? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Keir and Macron's cocaine party on a train to Ukraine, a story that 5 years ago no one would have taken the blindest bit of notice of because it was so clearly bonkers. Now, Emmanuel Macron feels the need to deny it, and millions of people, nonetheless, will still believe it. Why? Hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It almost makes you nostalgic for the Sunday Sport. I don't know if you remember the Sunday Sport newspaper. It used to have front pages that were quite magnificent. Bus found buried at South Pole was one of my all-time favourites, and there was a photograph to prove it. There was a photograph to prove that they'd found a double-decker bus, a London bus, buried at the South Pole. Some of the other classics, statue of Elvis found on Mars, and it was true because they had a picture of it. Gaza's face grows on white cliffs of Dover. That was a personal favourite, and possibly the most famous one of all. World War II bomber found on moon. And the Sunday Sport looked like a newspaper in every traditional way, and yet it wasn't. And that's the point about what has happened online, and with the connivance of sort of Russian bot farms, pro-Kremlin AI chatbots. It looks plausible. It looks real, to the point that somebody working at LBC could think it was true, even though, I mean, you can't even have a conversation about the possibility it might have been true if you've seen a close-up of the offending item, or even if you have the vaguest grasp of, what's the word I'm looking for? Reality. That is it. The vaguest grasp of reality. They're absolutely extraordinary. So what is going on? Why are people so desperate to believe stuff like this? 0345 6060 973. And what's it like to deal with someone like this? What do you do if it's your mum or your brother? Oh, no, I swear to you, Michelle Obama is a man. Macron's wife is supposed to be a man as well, isn't she? I've seen that conspiracy theory online. And Volodymyr Zelensky is spending all of the aid money, all of the military support on yachts. Joe's in Elstree. Joe, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
I'm just laughing at those headlines you just read out about Paul Gascoigne and Elvis. They are fantastic. Really
World's laziest slob lies in bed for 56 years. And here's one, actually, here's quite a sort of relevant one. Adolf Hitler was a woman. World War II's best kept secret. So there you go. Plus ça change. So what's going on here? Why are people so desperate to believe stuff like this? Or not? Maybe that's not even fair. Why does it work?
I think the only reason why it works, James, ironically enough, looking at it with a critical eye, is because of the so-called lies of the legacy mainstream media. And I'm just off the top of my head, I spoke to your researcher, just three over the past 5 years. One was the Hunter Biden laptop was Russia. That's now very, very debatable. The other one was if you get the COVID vaccine, you won't get COVID. that's demonstrably false. I mean, that is, we know that's false. But the point is, these were pushed by the mainstream, and now, but when people realise they are demonstrably false just by evidence, people now have a critical eye and think, well, hang on a minute, what is true and what isn't?
I think you're right.
The media have done this to themselves.
There's some truth in this. I mean, the message with the vaccines was always that the vaccine makes you safer. It reached some people as you definitely won't get it, but I don't think that was the mainstream media's problem. That was people not really paying attention problem. But it doesn't matter in the analysis that you're providing, because that explains why people have been left credulous about almost anything. But why would being told something that wasn't true make you more likely to believe something that is untrue?
Well, because as I've just demonstrated, by mainstream media.
No, but most people don't. Most people don't agree with you about the vaccines and stuff like that. So what you're saying is that the people most likely to believe that Keir Starmer and Macron were taking cocaine on a train are also going to be the people who believed that there was some sort of conspiracy surrounding COVID vaccines. Because I agree with you on that.
I mean, none of us know what was in the bag. It's unlikely to be cocaine.
There's no bag.
I accept that.
There's no bag.
Okay, so whether it's a bag or a tissue, the point is that none of us know for sure.
We do.
Well, we don't.
Well, then we don't know anything for sure.
But this is the doubt that the mainstream media has thrown in people's minds.
It's a tissue. You can literally see the evidence. This is Orwell, mate. You can keep talking about the mainstream media. This is absolutely denying the evidence of your own eyes and ears. So then we move on. So then we move on to the second question. Why would you want to?
I don't think people want to. I don't know where that idea has come from that people want to.
Well, you do.
No, I'm completely open-minded. I have no idea.
But you can't be completely open-minded. It's a tissue.
Okay, but
there's no yin to the yang. So why do you want to be open-minded? Why don't you want to believe what you can see? Why do you want to believe something you can't see?
Well, what I should say is that it doesn't really impact my life or my day.
That's not what I'm asking. Why don't you want to believe what you can see? Why do you want to believe things that you can't see?
Because of the general doubt that the legacy media have sown over the past 5 years.
Right. So you don't think it's got anything to do with the Kremlin then? Why would anyone want to believe that Zelensky was spending all his aid money on yachts?
I mean, again, I mean, to most people, that's very inconsequential.
But you can't. I just want to know why people want to believe this stuff.
I think you're looking at a tiny minority of people who absolutely
because you're one of them.
Really believe it.
You're one of them. In that you're giving it, you're paying it the time of day. I think something you accidentally said is true. I think it has probably got something to do with vaccine skepticism and COVID and all of the misinformation and lies that were peddled then. But that has been traced back to the Kremlin as well. You know, they were trying to hoover up vaccines on an industrial scale. I think Donald Trump sent them millions while simultaneously trying to persuade people like you in Elstree that the vaccines were dodgy or that they were going to do harm or that they wouldn't massively improve your chances of surviving the virus. So there's something there, as Ian says. He started off so well, but that's the point, isn't it? It somewhere this is becoming more normal. Well, it's perfectly plausible that they're all snorting cocaine on a train to Germany because Hunter Biden's laptop something. There's definitely something there. It's not quite what Joe thinks it is. But what do you think it is? Here's Tim Humphrey with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time, and it's a strange one, isn't it? Not just an LBC colleague, but also a significant number of people, millions apparently, signing up to the idea that the three main Western leaders, three key allies of Volodymyr Zelensky, which of course begs the question, who would want to undermine that sort of coalition, were photographed not noticing until it was too late that there was a big bag of cocaine on the table in front of them. It is obviously and incontrovertibly a tissue. In fact, as AP writes, I just had to watch the video. It's a tissue. It's clear to see. Why are people so stupid? I don't know if that's the right question. I beg your pardon, I don't know if that's the right answer, but you're not the only one who's chosen it. James says your average person is an idiot with too much access to persuasive information online, and they want to believe that they are special enough to see outside the matrix. And thank you to the 3 or 4 people who said that every time I say a tissue, you say bless you. My brother-in-law, writes this texter, tells me quite determinedly that Brigitte Macron, Michelle Obama, Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, to name a few, are all men. And he follows this up with, it's a fact. I just nod and say nothing. The rest of the family long ago stopped listening to his ramblings when he goes off into his rabbit hole. I don't think this is a normal phone-in, is it? Is the answer to the question of why are people believing the stuff about this tissue the same answer as why are people wanting to believe that Michelle Obama and Taylor Swift are men? I don't know that they're two questions that are going to have the same answer, so I'll keep asking them anyway. Josh is in Cardiff. Josh, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I think the question is probably also related a little bit to why people buy into populists like Farage. I think they want to make sense of it, really. Life's pretty tough at the minute for a lot of people, and they're probably feeling a little bit disenfranchised. So I think that maybe in their minds they need to sort of rationalise it of the people that are privileged in power are corrupt, or they're doing, vile, terrible things. And that makes everything a little bit more palatable for them.
I like this. I need to explore it further. It's not occurred to me before. Emma sent a message just as I took your call. It makes a better narrative than real life. People are so desperate for stories and community and group experiences. We don't have so much religion anymore, or campfire tales, or even pub gossip. So it all has to be done online. And it's written down, passed around, magnified and latched onto by grifters and modern-day priests as sources of power. They're, quotes, interesting, end quotes, even though they're not true. It's a failure of our leaders to provide better stories, cutting arts, etc., that's led to the proliferation of, quotes, wild narratives, end quotes. It feeds an appetite we all have, in other words, Josh. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes it's really difficult to make sense of, why is life in many ways much more difficult at the minute than it has been in yesteryears. And so, and people need to make some sense of that. And so they'll tell stories. They tell stories to themselves just to make sense of it. And
the suspension of the most basic powers of observation, specifically on this one, because, some of the other conspiracies that we've touched upon are not so immediately and obviously debunked. But here is a picture of a tissue. Why would anybody sort of close their eyes, metaphorically speaking, to observable reality in order to claim the, quotes, wild narrative, end quotes? Why?
Yeah,
what do they get? What do they get?
It's a little bit... It's very different from finding a double-decker bus in the South Pole.
On the South Pole, sorry.
Yeah,
the World War II bomber was on the moon.
Yeah, come on now. So, I don't know, you are right. It's a bit far-fetched, like, Michelle Obama being a man, but things like, our politicians are drug users, are uncorrupt, or Vladimir Zelensky owns a bunch of yachts and all the money's going to him. Those things maybe are a little bit more palatable for people, and it makes things a bit more easy to digest.
So it doesn't matter what they're believing. It's something that they, quotes, they, end quotes, don't want you to know. It's something that they are keeping from you. It's something that legacy media and mainstream media are conspiring to keep you in the dark. And that's really scary, because that means you end up believing whatever you want to believe. And of course, some politicians will ride it like surfers on waves. So they're not going to be as disgusted by it as I am or as you are. You're going to have, for example, Donald Trump turning up in Saudi Arabia today, where they literally sentence people to death for social media posts, with a vice president who claims that you can be imprisoned in this country for memes, or who repeats all sorts of nonsense about the freedom of speech that we have in this country. So cozying up to a regime that literally sentences people to death for social media posts while claiming that the problem is really here. Am I overthinking it? Is it part of the same process? You just destroy reality completely. You get people to believe anything, and then they'll believe everything. John's in Greenwich. John, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. Just echoing what your last caller said. Unfortunately, I've got a sister and a mother who... they've had hard lives, and neither of them have really worked. Not full-time employment, still part-time jobs. And I think this, James, if you travelled, if you got a good job, if you've done any sort of research, if you're well read, you're not falling for this stuff. You just aren't, because you've just got the skills to be able to see round it.
Well, I do have a colleague upstairs who fell for it yesterday for a few hours. But I don't know whether he proves your point, or I don't know whether they prove your point or disprove it.
Well, they may do. I mean, that's what I find the common denominator among my sister and my mum. I've had to stop talking to my sister because it's just become too much.
I'm sorry to hear
And with my mum, I know it's terrible. With my mum, I can sort of talk her around, and she's left to her own devices and goes back. But this was the one that got me a couple of years ago. She said, they're even controlling the food we eat.
Go on.
On the phone. Go on, yeah. She said, well, they've invented seedless grapes so that people can't grow their own grapes.
Wow.
And I didn't immediately have the comeback. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. And all of a sudden, I just thought, well, propagation. Just snip a branch off.
I know. And does that work? Does explaining that work?
I rang her up, and it's like, well, that's fine.
It's been on Mystery Hour, John. It's been on Mystery Hour, that question.
Not in this context, though.
No, not in this context.
No, it did work, but then there's always something else, yeah? And I think there's a little bit of, if you've not got a great life and you're not well-travelled, you've got a lot of money, you've got a lot of influence, I think this is your way in of having something that no one else knows about, whether it's rubbish or not. It's like a tip for the Grand National. You pass it on to all your mates.
Yeah.
It comes last, and everyone just forgets that you've given rubbish information.
But for a minute, you had contacts that no one else had. For a minute, you could tap your nose and wink at people. And if it had come in, of course, then the myth gets expanded. The myth becomes enormous.
Exactly. I mean, none of these other ones do ever come in as truth, but it just doesn't stop it. And it's really sad. It's quite a lonely place to be. Because
you're a good man. You're a good man working it through like that. And I know that you're estranged from your sister, and that must be tough. But the idea that you have sympathy for how they end up in this position is a much healthier approach, I think, than my gut reaction, which is to point and laugh.
It's just frustrating, James.
Yes, of course.
It's like you can laugh until you stop laughing, correct? It's just frustrating. That's what I'd say.
Well, it's the right word to use, but it's also dangerous because, one thinks back to the Farage riots and the effort that people put into spreading complete lies then, whether they knew they were complete lies or not. They certainly knew that they could not have known that the things they claimed were true because they weren't. And that environment, that was very much an online thing. And that environment, very much part of the one probably that sees a photograph of a tissue and concludes that it's a bag of cocaine. 12:42 is the time. How do you get someone out of it? I wonder, because John doesn't know how to. He might be able to persuade his mum that there isn't a massive international conspiracy about seedless grapes, but he hasn't been able to persuade her or his sister that some of the other things they have been persuaded to believe are not true. Declan's in Liverpool. Declan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. What a world, eh? No,
what a world, what a world indeed,
Declan. People who love their soaps,
yeah,
right? Whichever soap, right? And they'll see an actor from their favourite soap in the street one day,
yes,
and they won't call out the real name; they'll call out the actor's name.
But the character's name,
Yeah, and they get involved in the storyline, and they're like, they know it's not true, but it resonates with them. Say, oh, did you see what Phil did, Shannon, and blah, blah, blah. So the way to get at people who believe in the Macron story, and a journalist, can't remember the name in America, said that there are people, Trump supporters, who actually like being lied to. They love it. It's entertainment.
Yeah.
It makes them feel special. And I echo previous callers. They've got sad little existences.
Well, but no, you see, you're doing that thing there, which I do, and I'm not doing it anymore because of that experience I had in the jury room. I don't know quite what the words are that I need to explain why that was such a profound moment for me. It was because it could have been one of my mum's friends.
Oh, yes.
It didn't feel like it was someone I would never break bread with, someone I would never share with, someone who was utterly removed from my universe. It was someone who was not. I mean, that's what's changed. So I don't think that, and this isn't a criticism of you because it's a place I've been to myself, but I don't think just saying sad little lives and things like that is going to help anybody get.
Well, hard lives, as one of your previous callers said, life is so hard and it's so confusing. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, you don't need to apologise. I've done it myself.
Yeah, it reminds me that where's the humanity? Where's the thing about, tell the truth.
Yeah, just tell the truth. And you don't have to outwardly look like you've had a hard life. That's why I talk about the fact that this woman was middle class. I think I've probably been a bit harsh on our colleague who fell for the cocaine one. He's a cheerful fella. I think he just saw an opportunity for some mischief. But if you are excluded, if you feel excluded or disenfranchised, perhaps, are you more susceptible to this? And of course, top of the class today for anyone who can tell us how you break the spell, if indeed you can. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:48 is the time. There's always a kernel of truth. That's how they work. First call of this hour talking about Hunter Biden's laptop, which did not contain any evidence of wrongdoing by Joe Biden, and which was part of a misinformation campaign that Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani, key consiglieres, key advisors to Donald Trump, were involved in. And we know also that a Russian agent was involved in trying to expand and inflate the story of a second laptop that never materialized. But it didn't do any of the thing. And 51 US intelligence professionals, former intelligence officials, warned at the time that the laptop had all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. Doesn't mean they're right, but it certainly doesn't mean they were lying. So you don't want to dig too deeply into the facts. You just want to believe that nothing is as it seems. COVID vaccines are going to kill you, and yet you just got enough tiny little kernels of reality to build this entire house of cards from the ground up. That is how it works, because I got an extraordinary message during that last break from someone sending me a list of all the politicians who have had problems with drugs or convictions for drug use, and that means that this could be true, which is incredible when you think about it. So here is a paedophile. Well, that means you could be one. Here is the existence of somebody doing something who has absolutely nothing to do with that person over there, but it proves that person over there could be doing exactly the same thing. It also speaks to an idea of politicians all being part of the same, I don't know, species, a different species from the rest of us. And that is incredibly dangerous for reasons that Sadiq Khan was alluding to just an hour ago. I think it was Farage, wasn't it, who said something like, "I cannot exaggerate the contempt in which I hold all career politicians." Says a career politician. It's weird. It's so many strands here. If I ever write another book, I suppose it's going to have to be about this kind of stuff. And what I've done in my previous books is trying to knit together things that are not immediately linked. But it does feel as if there are various strands here that need tying together. A lot of it is helpful to Russia. But why would claiming Michelle Obama is a man be helpful to Russia? Except, of course, to sort of undermine or delegitimize or render subversive your political opponents. Tom's in Birmingham. Tom, what would you like to say?
Hunter Biden's laptop, mate. The problem is,
yes,
there's no objective truth anymore, and all the weirdest stuff that you could lie about, they'll put out everywhere. There's no idea that's too wild for it to be on the internet.
Well, there is, because no one is going to believe that they found a bus buried at they are, aren't they?
Oh well, there was a photo, James.
Yeah, they know if it turned up in the right feeds at the right time, dressed up in the right way, people would believe that, as long as it helped them identify an enemy. So Volodymyr Zelensky has hidden a yacht in the South Pole. Here's a picture of it buried in an ice cap.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the technology's moved on so fast, and there's all these websites. I mean, obviously, the death of the printing press or whatever you want to call it. Anyone can have a news site now.
Yeah.
So there's all these websites everywhere. You can't find the information to rebut all their claims as quickly as they can make the claims. I used to argue a lot with people on Twitter, and you would think that you knew what the subject was, but they have so many levels of conspiracy theory that everything that you say, they can pick a little hole in it, complete with citations. They'll send you to a website that looks like it has information, and you literally don't have the time to rebut all their claims. And Hunter Biden's laptop, we've moved on.
They haven't.
Yeah.
You can go online now. You can find shock new evidence about Hunter Biden's laptop.
Really, still,
from
because it worked. Well, Alex Jones is back on this story. He's you'd have thought that being found to have lied and to have been held financially responsible for lying about the parents of murdered children would be career-ending, but it's not, is it? Not in the world you describe.
Not for his listeners. He's a hero. He's a martyr.
Still, even now.
And you can win a lot of arguments by spouting misinformation. There's almost like a starter pack. If you want to become a conspiracy theorist, you can go online. You can find all the information that you need. It's a lot easier than talking the truth, because if you want to find out the truth, you're immediately on the back foot, because they have no interest in the truth. And it's a lot harder
to be detailed and deep than it is to be simplistic and shallow.
Yeah. So you can feel like the big man. You can be the voice of reality, shooting down all their claims, because you don't actually care about finding out what's happening in the world. You just want to win.
And why do they want to win? I know this is where the one area where we're approaching a consensus. But what do you think? What do they get out? What does this person get out of it?
Well, just feeling like they're being listened to. When you're the only person saying one particular voice in the debates, it's a lot easier to feel like the big person than when you're just in a mass on one side. It's why you can make a lot of money on YouTube being a conspiracy theorist, having these videos talking nonsense.
And that's part
is a lot easier than making a blog of essay format political analysis.
Yeah, I mean, it's tickets for the ghost train times a million, isn't it? And as we've said a million times on this programme, you're going to sell a lot more tickets for the ghost train than you are for the Speak Your Way machine. Here's another example. Admittedly, I don't know how seriously anyone should take someone who describes themselves as lone Viking, but you're a liar, James, or Goebbels, as you are known in our house. Freedom of speech has been removed under Starmer. People have been imprisoned. The people you're referring to have been imprisoned after pleading guilty to crimes like incitement or spreading racial hatred. So offering up an honest opinion that harms nobody or encourages physical harm against nobody is not a crime. I don't know what freedom of speech it is that you feel has been removed, Mr. Viking, but you're an absolute idiot. There you go, that's me using my free speech. Because you are determined to believe that you are being persecuted or that you are under threat. If these people were being treated unfairly, why do you think they pleaded guilty? 12:55 is the time. Hakeem is in Brixton. Hakeem, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, mate. That was great. I got on. Thanks, Phil. Yes, I was talking to your colleague and we were just discussing why specifically people would believe it. And I think one of the things I was mentioning was that it's a supreme mistrust of authority.
There's probably something in that. And it hasn't grown up organically, necessarily. It's been carefully cultivated in some corners. But once you are persuaded to believe...
It's a combination of both.
Yeah, once you're persuaded to believe something, you can believe anything.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I think there is an element of it being organic in the sense that the example I gave to your colleague was that a lot of us can look around in society and see things are wrong and no one's seemingly willing to fix them. The example I gave was the sewage being discharged into our waterways.
Go on.
Everybody knows it's a problem. No one's really seeming to fix it.
Yeah.
Your colleague Nick Ferrari is always banging on about it every morning, near enough. So.
Well, we're all troubled by that. I mean, it's a big issue. But how does it lead to believing anything?
So if you take, that's one example. If you take other examples that I gave a colleague like...
well, no, you need to give them to me. I'm not party to the conversation you had with my colleague.
Yeah, so one of the things I said was like the declassification of the MK Ultra program in America.
Right.
I'm not going to pretend like I know all the specifics or details, but
this is full on. The human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the CIA. So
denied for years.
Yeah,
then if you find out 40 years later that's actually true,
then you're more likely to believe that Emmanuel Macron was doing coke on a train with Keir Starmer.
Exactly.
I'm not buying that bit. That's a leak. That's a leak.
A few other things.
Yeah, maybe. So if it turns out that you've been lied to once, then nothing is true.
No, I don't think it's once though, because I think
all right, 10 times. Then nothing is true. Yeah, but you give me MK Ultra, I will give you 5,000 examples of CIA programs that you haven't been lied to about. So why do the 5,000 not outweigh the one?
Because I think when you're in a position of authority, as our government might be, and again, I'm not someone who particularly believes any of the things that you've discussed or given examples of on the show.
No, but you're speaking of a fracturing of credulity, if you like, or a dissolving, a diluting of incredulity. Do you know why anybody wants us to believe that Michelle Obama is a man?
I laughed when you said that because I was literally having that conversation with someone at the weekend, and when they said it to me, they were so serious. They're serious. Have you seen the video? She was on Ellen DeGeneres or something, dancing, all of these other things. And what I think it is those people have a they. They always have a they. So it's always they are trying to control us. They are trying to hide things from us. And the they, usually, if you drill it down, is whoever's in power.
Yeah, maybe, except now. No one's doing it when you have actually got complete head cases in power. The people that have got problems with the Obamas think that Donald Trump, who's about to receive a massive aeroplane off the Qataris and currently paying homage in a country to an administration that literally gives the death penalty to people for their social media posts and is set to make millions of dollars in business. It's incredible, really. But I guess you only create a world in which you can be corrupt when you've successfully portrayed the non-corrupt as corrupt. Akeem, thank you. The missing word round, this is a bit of an unexpected one, and it is the first time I think that we've taken a missing word round from an LBC headline, which I have now successfully lost, but I can roughly remember what it was. It's the deputy leader of the Green Party previously used hypnotherapy to, quotes, enlarge, end quotes, women's breasts. And that is something that emerged in an interview with Tom Swarbrick on this radio station yesterday. Make of that what you will. I'm done. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on both Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinions, as well as put your news categories in the order that you want, and pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts. So do download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick. Goodness knows what excitements are popping up on his programme today after yesterday's high bar. But now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.